So solid rockets, the material they make their fuel out of is similar to like a rubber eraser. That's the
Mm-hmm.
consistency of it. And they cast it in place. So it's like a case full of a cylinder full of that rubber eraser material, and you'd call the fuel a grain when it's cast into place like that. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I can picture a little. Can definitely
Yeah.
picture it. We're live,
So
by the
it's
way.
basically just a cylinder. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh well, we'll get into all that, but yeah, welcome guys to the Whitepill stream. Managed to
Hello, everybody.
secure. Oh, sorry. Managed to secure yet another interview with none other than Propel, who is the chief rocket scientist for tpot, if not all of Twitter. So welcome. Thank you for taking the time.
It's a hefty title I didn't realize I had, but I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for talking to me.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I don't really, I don't meet a lot of people that are in this space. So you're the first one I've met. So far, you're breaking ground in that regard. But I asked you this off stream in terms of where this kind of passion that you got for rocketry, because it's quite unique. Like I don't really meet a lot of people that have had moments in their life where they're like, oh, that's my thing. Like I want that. But it's not just like I want to be a ballerina or like a soccer player. Like it's like I want to traverse the cosmos, or at least enable humanity to
Mm-hmm.
do that. Like what was that like for you? Like what was that process like?
Yeah, so growing up, my dad was an engineer. He actually went to the same school that I'm going to right now for mechanical engineering, which I'm about to graduate in. So I grew up moving all over the US while he worked for a construction company that built big power plants. So we would always move around. He would build one giant power plant and then would move to the next spot. So he was always talking to me about engineering and stuff, which I've always had an interest in. And specifically, I remember one memory I always think about when I think about getting into engineering was when I was probably like 13 or so. We were riding on a plane to go visit my grandparents, and I just asked him how jet engines work. And I just kept asking him more intricate details as he went into the description of it. And I was kind of hooked on the thought of figuring out how to make engines work in different ways. And so I always asked him questions about internal combustion engines and jet engines, and that kind of sparked my learning journey. And then, yeah, that's why I picked engineering and started going to school here. And I've also always liked space and Star Wars and kind of been a space nerd my whole life. And I'm pretty inspired by seeing all these new SpaceX launches. So, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it certainly does. It's it's just it's interesting because I have a bit of a parallel in my family. I have someone who's
Mm-hmm.
a commercial airline pilot for a major airline here, and
Awesome.
his kind of moment with it was that he was at an airport. I forget where we were flying. I might not even been born yet. Yeah, it's my older brother. But in any case, we were standing at the airport, and he's just looking at all these airplanes like take off and land and take off and land, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to do. That looks fucking
Yeah.
cool. Which is, I mean, it makes sense. Like with something that's so like just so much bigger than yourself in a way that you can't even. It's almost impossible to comprehend the entirety of it. Um,
Yeah.
that you're just
Especially when you're
overtaken.
young.
Yeah. You're overtaken by this like sense of awe. You're just like, holy shit, it's amazing. That's incredible. Like you forget half the time that like, yeah, we're just lucky enough to have developed on this rock, but everything else is out there.
Yeah. Like in school, back then I was learning about like just basic algebra. Meanwhile, my dad was telling me about compressible and incompressible fluids, trying to squeeze them into jet engines in different ways to make them work. And I was like, that's what I want to do. But yeah, the intricacy of how the systems worked just captured my imagination, and I definitely wanted to learn more about it. So That's what
Okay.
started me on this journey, yeah.
So as a kid, you went to like all the STEM fields and whatnot. What does that actually look like, um, in terms of like going through the post secondary path? Because I figured this is not something that one can do by just like self educating or like through any outside means. Like you have to go through the university system. You have to go through all of that just because of how much, I don't know, materials, efforts, money it takes to fund all of that.
Yeah, I won't say it's impossible to do it without post-secondary education because I think it is possible. It would just be incredibly difficult to know like where to start with the fundamentals and work your way through just the years of intensive learning to get all the depth of knowledge you need. So it's certainly much easier to do it the traditional route where you go to school and stuff. So
So, so what does that look
yeah,
like in the U.S. That actual the path towards that?
yeah. So for me, I went to high school and public school here. And then as soon as I graduated with high school, I jumped into the state university that I got accepted to here in Utah. So I started going to school here, but I didn't have all of the prerequisite knowledge I needed to really start even the basic engineering courses like calculus, chemistry. Like they didn't accept my high school diploma as enough to start the basic math classes. So
Hmm.
I had to take some basic general math classes like trigonometry and college algebra, which was kind of unfortunate for me, but I don't know. It worked out. It was a good thing in the long run because it got me into the swing of things at college. So normally you go to college for 4 years and you get a bachelorate degree. In engineering, it's a lot more common for people to take 5 or 6 years to get an engineering degree just because of the complexity and how depth intensive all the courses are. So for me, this is my 6th year of school for my bachelorate degree, and I'm about to finish it up. But part of that was because when COVID happened, all of my classes switched to online, and I didn't want to do full time online school. So I took a year of part time school where I just did some generals while I worked full time and saved some money, and then jumped back into school once everything reopened up after COVID cooled off a bit. And then, yeah, my journey's been kind of different than a typical college student in the fact that I've worked a lot more than a normal college student is recommended to work. A lot of the time, they tell college students to not work more than 20 hours a week when you're going to full time school. For the last few years prior to this last year, I worked 40 hours a week, sometimes more than 40 hours a week, while doing full time school and classes, which is really difficult to do because there's just not enough time in the day to get everything done that you need to.
Hmm.
But I did it anyways, and that's how I was able to pay my way through school without taking out a whole bunch of loans. Recently, this last year, when I've got this job at the Propulsion Research Laboratory, the mentor I have that's in charge of the laboratory here, he's volunteered to pay my undergraduate tuition for me, so that took a lot of pressure off of me to work full time. So I've switched back to part time working now, but as an overachiever, I usually end up working a little extra. But it's definitely cooled off quite a bit, and now I do full time school and mostly part time work while I'm pursuing this last year of my bachelorate degree.
That's one hell of a sponsor you got there for someone to like take that weight off your shoulders. Because I can't imagine that an education like that would be cheap, especially with how the U.S. post-secondary system is run. Um,
Mhm.
that I mean, if you're okay to like to give a ballpark, like what does that kind of education look like over the span of 6 years? Would you say?
So typically it's more than what I pay. Because I go to a state school, it's a little cheaper than like the national average, but I pay around somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 a semester in tuition. So it's
Whoa.
around 12K a year, but that's a lot less than a normal education post-secondary university would cost. So yeah.
Wow. That is very pricey. I mean, when I went to uni, I didn't study anything as sophisticated as that. I'm a social science major, so so it's not even a science. It has that label attached to it. I know. I know the joke, but it yeah it would have cost me at least like here in Canadian, so around
hmm
think 3.7K per semester, I believe. So that would be like
hmm
around 7 or so. Which in American, I think that's what is that 7K CAD to USD, like probably like closer to 10K, maybe 11. Oh, right. No, it's the other way around. What am I saying?
Around that,
Jesus
yeah.
Christ. Yeah, sorry, 4.6. So 4.6 per year or 4.8 per year.
hmm
Or 5, let's say. So total the time that I spent in uni would have cost around like probably 30K in American, something
hmm
like that. Yeah. But that is one hell of a benefactor you got there that's able to actually pick up the tab on that. That must be a huge relief.
Yes, it definitely is, especially because I'm married and I've got a kid, so got to take care of those too. And she doesn't work, so it's all on me.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a lot to juggle there. Um so when do you actually in post secondary, when do you actually get the first chance to like go into a lab and actually start playing with like whether it's different materials or like just any like actual like tangible parts of the rocket? Because I would imagine a lot of the education is would be built around like just studying and studying and studying, but not a lot of like
hmm
implementation. I'm sure like you had like maybe a science fair or like some projects where you got to like create like some, I don't know, gas powered rocket or something like that. But when you actually get to play with like the real thing, when does that happen for you?
hmm So, there's a few parts to that. There's like laboratory work that you do that's part of the curriculum of your degree, and you can start that. Like, you'll start your first project in engineering your first year. They do a little project where you build a remote controlled boat at my university. Pretty much every school has something similar to that.
Hmm.
But there's always labs with your classes throughout your schooling. But my university is a little unique in that it's got a really good undergraduate research program. So there's a lot of on campus jobs for students here that can go jump into higher level research pretty early compared to other universities. Most of the time, you have to graduate and get your bachelor's degree and then go into grad school to get a real research position. That's the standard for a lot of US universities. But here, they're pretty encouraging of undergraduates to get involved in research. But on the flip side of that, they don't typically take like freshmen or sophomores in their early years into undergraduate research. Like they still do it sometimes, but like the lab I work in, getting hands on with the rocket, they probably won't hire you unless you're at least a junior recommended to be like a senior in engineering, just because there's so much base knowledge you have to learn before you can understand anything of what we do in here. You have to take a whole load of engineering courses to just build the base knowledge you need to understand what happens. Like you have to get basically through fluids, which is a year 3 course, before you can understand much of what happens here. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, no, it definitely does. And when does it come into play? Because you mentioned off record or off the show rather, that obviously there's certain things that you can't talk about, in regards to the projects with I would assume it has to do something with security clearance. Does
hmm
that like is that something that you're like immediately told on day one? Like expect that to be a normal part of the job, or like is there like the whole series of background checks they got to do? Like what was that like when you saw it first?
So, it's not exactly like a lot of aerospace companies require you to get a secret clearance before you can start working there and get really hands-on involved. We don't have to get an actual secret clearance to work here as a researcher because we don't have any current projects that are like top secret, restricted by the government. But sometimes we could get a contract to do that that would require us to get an actual clearance. The big thing that we have to be concerned with is ITAR restrictions. You can't do intellectual property transfer to other nations just willy-nilly. It's not good practice to just post technical specs of our designs online, if that makes sense. So I could talk about basic stuff because we publish public research papers that anybody can go download and read what we do. So as long as it's on that level, we're fine to talk about it. But there are some specific technologies we're developing here that we're not allowed to share the intimate details about just because it's more new cutting edge tech.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the basic stuff that we develop for our big contracts is fine to talk about. It's just the more technical new technology stuff that's more restrictive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that certainly does. Um, in terms of the types of labs that you guys have, besides doing the firing test that you showed on your page there, um,
Mm-hmm.
which man, that was I just wish there was sound. I know it would have like maxed out the mic, but I wish we could just hear that because my
There
God,
was
like
actually supposed to be sound in that video, but we've been playing with this new camera system and we're
hmm
also running OBS to get it to work. And since we've had all those changes, we've been having a lot of bugs with it. And we don't have a set system yet, but in the
gotcha.
future, there will be sound videos coming. So
Okay. And what is that actually? While we have this video here, the little this little trail that comes off uh the flame, is it like just
like those
unspent fuel?
specks coming and flying out.
Yeah.
So that towards the end of the burn is graphite. So that's our nozzle basically destroying itself throughout
Oh.
the burn because it gets so hot. It's just eroding away and chunks of graphite are pyrolyzing and burning. So because there's excess oxygen and it gets super, super hot, like that flame is over 3,000 degrees centigrade. And
Whoa.
so once the graphite reaches above like 800 degrees centigrade, it starts reacting with that oxygen and burning kind of like a chunk of charcoal would. So it's basically chunks of the rocket flying out of the end. That's what all
Oh,
those little
okay.
flecks are.
Gotcha. And what was the word you said? Pyrizing? Am I saying that right or
Yeah, pyrolyzing.
pyrolyzing?
Yeah, it's similar to combusting or burning. You could think of it like just burning away.
Yeah, that was something to see on the timeline when I scrolled by that. I was like, holy shit, there's just people out there in fucking labs just firing off rockets. This is great. I love
Yeah,
it.
super fun.
So this is the actual the engine itself, yeah.
Yep, so that's the rocket that I've been designing for the last actually month and a half or so. It's kind of crazy to think how quickly I put that thing together. Like I got an email at the beginning of November saying, "Could you do the drawings for this and like make CAD models?" I'm like, "Sure." So I did that in like a day, made all of the drawings and CAD models, and then the next day basically ordered all the hardware I would need. And then the next week it all got here and I started machining it up myself. So really quick turnaround on that project.
Yeah, that is a blazing fast. And what was the website that you said you guys used for like for procurement?
I just buy a lot of stuff just straight off McMaster Car. Yeah, those guys right there. They have, this is like an engineer's dream site. Everything you
Whoa.
need. They've
In
got it
every
all.
size possible.
Yep, every size possible. And it's nice and organized too. If you click on any one of those, they've got
Oh, that is so
options
nice.
and different
Oh,
sizes, and they have CAD models for each one too. Like if you click on another one and then click in, if you click on those blue part numbers on the right, you can get a product detail and download the CAD model right there
Oh, that's
for
awesome.
every part they have. Yeah, they're
That's
pretty good.
so sick. I love that. And I can tell that an engineer built this site because my
Yeah,
God, there's
very
no
practical, right?
no animations, just click and click and click. You find what
And
you
it's pretty
need, everything
snappy
is
too,
yeah, I love
really
it.
fast.
That's awesome. Wow. I never thought that websites like this just existed. I don't know. I never had to like encounter anything like this, but that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah, engineers always joke that McMaster has everything, and they really do have a lot of random stuff. I think they even have some snacks on here too.
Oh hell yeah, they got fucking snacks. Oh yeah.
Yeah, they do. Crazy,
That's
right?
awesome. That is awesome. I fucking love America, man. This is amazing. Only in America. Only in America could you have something like this.
Yeah, very American.
Legendary. Wow, you could really just buy fucking anything here. Generators, batteries. Oh my god. All sorts of materials
Yeah,
here. Wow.
you can basically build an entire rocket just on that website.
Yeah, and buy all the safety gear for it too. Absolutely everything. This is awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, you could this is like a homemaker's dream right here. You got everything you
It
need.
is.
Wow.
So yeah, we
Okay.
get a lot of stuff from them, and that's basically our go-to because they're fairly quick shipping. It's usually around a week or 4 or 5 days to get your stuff. So yeah,
I'm
they're
saving
pretty
the
good to
site.
work with.
I'm definitely saving this in case I ever need something. I don't think we have anything
You
like this
should.
in Canada, but that's awesome. So in regards to your engine, so this is the part that's made out of graphite, or is this whole chunk
Yep.
body right here as well?
That body right there is just a steel tube. But yeah, at the end there's a hunk of graphite, and that's the nozzle. So it restricts the flow of the hot gas, and when it like narrows it down to a point, the flow converges to supersonic speed, so it gets like Mach 1. And then as it opens back up, the gas expands out, and because it's already over supersonic, by expanding it, it accelerates it again. So it goes above Mach 1 to the exit plane. So
Wait, so you're
nozzle is
telling me
what,
like this went above Mach 1?
yeah, the gas coming out of the end of it is above Mach 1.
Okay, this is gonna sound retarded because I'm the furthest thing away from a STEM student. So, because my understanding is that's the sound barrier. Once you break it, there's supposed to be a pop. Does that also happen when you guys ignite this, or is there's not enough force behind it, or like what like is
It does. So
okay?
if you look up rocket shock diamonds,
Oh, yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
so the shock diamonds are the supersonic waves intersecting with each other inside of the plume. So each one of those is like the wave of a sonic boom, and they're bouncing off of each other and making those diamond shapes
Mm-hmm.
as it goes throughout the plume. So that's what
Interesting.
that shape is right there. So yes, they do have a supersonic shock. Yeah.
Nuts. That's fucking nuts, dude. You guys just built this thing.
Agreed.
Wow. That is something. Do you have a on your Twitter here? Do you have like a cross section of it, or like these like the closest ones, or like a CAD drawing of it?
I could probably find a good CAD drawing of a hybrid rocket.
So graphite, I'm guessing it's used specifically for its heat handling properties.
Yes, it's very, very heat conductive. Open link. Here, I'll just send you a link right now that'll have some good cross-section views of it all.
Sure.
Oh, it failed to send. There you go, it worked that time.
I like how these
At least it says sent on my end.
I like how these bolts are just hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you guys had to use like some Loctite or something to make sure that they didn't slip.
Nope. We just torqued it with my calibrated arm. Said, "Yep, that's tight enough," and then we sent it.
Oh, are you serious?
Yep. That's
Oh,
how
you
we
guys
did
just
it.
like just manually just like.
Just tightened each one down.
Well, that's a lot of faith in your bolts, man. In the threads, I mean, that's a lot of faith you guys are putting that.
Yep.
Wow.
You can also
Interesting.
just look up hybrid rocket, and then usually one of the first few is my professor's lecture slides. You can just look at the cross-section views of it if you want. I
Yeah,
don't know
just
why that message didn't go through to you, but it says
it's because
sent on my end.
yeah, I had a chat open on my phone as well, so it sent to that one instead. But
Oh, I see.
oh, there we go. Yeah, I just sent the tab. Yes, I trust. Yes.
Are you sure you trust me?
There's an edu.edu there. I trust the edu. Okay.
So yeah, that's what a cross-section view of a hybrid rocket looks like on the very bottom there. So
Oh, like
it
you
was on
mean
the
like on this
top
page
page,
or
yeah.
okay?
So those are 3 different styles of rockets on
Oh,
that
I
page.
see.
So the hybrid's the bottom one, where we've got a fuel grain where you spray the oxidizer past it, and after you ignite it, it burns just like you saw on that video. So the green part there's the fuel grain, which I just print out on my desk. And the oxidizer tank is just oxygen. You spray past it
And the fuel
ignite it,
grain,
and then it looks like that.
the fuel grain is like that. That's this part right here.
We have used that as a fuel grain, yes. That's nylon. So yeah,
Okay, so
exactly.
petroleum byproducts, like anything like that, like that's an ideal fuel for the kind of rockets that you guys are building, at least in these experiments.
Yeah, basically different types of plastic is what we've been using for our fuel grains. So like nylon or ABS plastics are typically what we end up using. Although I've been trying to do some experiments with some other types of plastics to see if we can find something that's got better energy density. But yeah, plastic's nice because it's stable. It's not like an explosive. You don't have to worry about carrying it around. Whereas those solid rocket motors, they're explosive. So you have to have all this training to be able to handle it. And they're super expensive to mix up. So
Okay.
that would be an advantage of using a hybrid over a solid rocket motor.
So what would you say to this then? Have you heard of the ocean cleanup project?
I've heard of them, yeah.
So
Got the
they're
boats and the plastic patch, right?
yeah, exactly. For anyone that hasn't heard, highly recommend that you follow this project. Am I really not going to be able to find it? There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, there's a giant patch of garbage in the Pacific Ocean that is the size of Texas and constantly growing. And a gentleman by the name, I think his name is Boyan. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's this guy from Netherlands. When he was 14, he was vacationing with his parents somewhere in Europe, and as he was swimming, they just saw all this plastic floating around. So at the age of 14, he decided to do something about it, which is fucking incredible on its own. And after having a TED talk and gathering investors up, they created this company that essentially created, yeah, these essentially like these giant ships here that you saw there that would dredge, well, not dredge it, but like collect all the plastic. And they specifically aim at putting them near riverbeds and just main rivers throughout, mostly like South American, also some African countries, Southeast Asia as well, because those tend to be the major polluters. So they collect all this plastic, and now they're working on like actually making stuff out of it. They partnered with Ray-Bans and they made some sunglasses, and they also did, I think they did a record with Coldplay, where Coldplay actually got their they used some of the plastic to make some of their vinyls. I realized that with the way that they have to sort the plastic and how labor intensive it is and whatnot, I don't think you'd get like the cleanest fuel. But would you see any kind of possibility of that being like just a possible source of fuel in the future? That like, is there a way to refine it or separate the plastics in a way? Because here you guys actually have like the raw material versus a mix from the ocean. Do you think there's any viability in that?
Yeah, one second. We did a experiment on that exact topic. There's a research paper from my university where we can't find it though. Oh well. Yeah, anyways, we did do a project that's titled Refuse to Rockets, where they just gathered up a bunch of old plastic and shredded it and recycled it and did fuel grains with it. And they ran into some challenges with it because you have to typically when we're designing a rocket, you want to know what fuel you're using so that you can design the geometry to work, so you can balance the engine. And typically if you don't know exactly what type of plastic you're putting in there, then you're not going to be able to optimize your rocket design.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, they were able to separate like one type of plastic out, and they recycled it and they made a rocket out of it and they burned it, and it had somewhat lower performance but not much lower, so it was a viable fuel source is basically what I'm trying to say. That yes, you could make fuel out of recycled plastic.
But
One
it wouldn't be
interesting
like.
idea I had.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. So I found this research paper about pulling CO2 out of the air and making plastic with it. And I don't know if you know much about Mars, but the atmosphere on Mars is almost all CO2.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could go to Mars and then pull CO2 out of the air and make plastic out of that CO2, then you just have to send some 3D printers to Mars and you can print with recycled plastic that you're just pulling the CO2 out of the air. So out of thin air, you can make solid materials that you could work with.
Interesting. Yeah, because I was thinking, my mind was stuck on like, okay, well, at what point can this actually be used in a rocket to escape atmosphere and like actually go elsewhere? I figure it can't because the fuel wouldn't be nearly as strong enough. There's the force that you would need to actually escape that. But that would be an interesting application. I want to look that up now. How the like carbon capture into plastic formation process. I've never heard of that. I've heard of like carbon capture, but I never really understood what they do it once they capture it.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about this type of stuff. One of my favorite things about being a researcher is definitely just thinking of random ideas like this and like, how can I apply this into something actually useful?
Yeah, I mean this looks legit, and yeah, I'll take your word for it with the research paper. That would be a hell of a thing if we could do that. The only issue that, and I look, like I said, I don't have a STEM background, but I've heard some chatter in regards to an issue there being like if we take out like too much carbon from the atmosphere, that it could be problematic, and so like all this kind of
definitely, yeah.
Yeah, like this feverish idea that people have with like everything has to be green and we have to push for these initiatives. It's like, okay, but like we gotta be smart about it. We can't just go all the way overboard because yeah, like what happens when we don't have enough carbon in the atmosphere? Do we just start burning tires to offset that? Like
That's quite an idea.
well, we we got to get it
yeah,
back in somehow.
There's a mass hysteria right now about CO2 in the air and how it's a greenhouse gas, but most people don't even know what percent of our atmosphere is CO2. Do you know what it is on the off chance?
Before looking it up, I want to say maybe 15%.
Yeah, that's usually about what most people guess, but it's actually measured in parts per million.
Right,
because it is less than 0.1%.
Whoa. That's a lot more, or sorry, a lot less than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Well, CO2, like it's sexy in the sense that like you can.
0.04% is what it is. Something like
Wow.
that.
Wow.
So that's the air that plants breathe. They can't do anything with oxygen. They can't aspirate without that 0.04%. So yes, we should be careful and monitor our CO2 and try to not pump too much into the atmosphere. But it is necessary for all life to survive, because without CO2, the plants don't live. And if the plants don't live, then we don't live. So that's why greenhouses in the Netherlands, they'll run generators just so that they can suck the exhaust fumes into their greenhouses, and they can grow plants faster and get greener produce more quickly.
What? I never heard of that.
I'm not sure if they still do it, but when my dad lived there for a couple of years, he told me about it. So definitely fact check me on that one. But
Yeah, no, it looks like
yeah,
it.
it looks like they do.
Yeah, they burn natural gas, which generates approximately 1.8 kilos of CO2 for every. I don't even know what that is. What kind of unit that is?
Meter cubed, it looks like.
Oh, okay. I thought it was that, but the one oh I
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Huh.
but yeah, CO2 is an interesting problem. It's definitely provoked a lot of hysteria in the public that, in my opinion, is somewhat unnecessary, and they don't understand the problem fully.
Oh, it's
Even a
certainly
lot of
overblown.
scientists, like alleged scientists even, seem to overblow the problem in ways that don't make sense in my mind. A lot of the problem with modeling the future of the climate is every model you do is just a simulation of the future, right?
Mhm.
And every model is inaccurate in some way. They teach you this in engineering when you're trying to create non-dimensional parameters for wind tunnels, basically, and fluids. So you have to understand what your degrees of freedom are and when you're creating models. And every model you ever make is going to be wrong in some way. The goal is to make it as close to reality as possible. But when you move up to the scale of something like the Earth, when you're trying to model what the Earth is going to do in 10 years, it's really hard to do that accurately because there's so many variables that are uncontrollable. Like there's so many variables it's not even possible to name all of the variables because there's still things on Earth that we don't even know exist. We haven't even explored all of our oceans and things like that. So when you hear people say things like the climate models project that the temperature is going to change by this much in a few years, there might be some truth in that, but I'm highly skeptical of just accepting that as reality. I don't know. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say there?
No, it certainly does. Because even though even though this is not something that I have expertise in, I can recognize a media campaign when I see one, and
Mm-hmm.
with CO2, it is in my opinion, it's 100% overblown. Not to say that it isn't a problem or that it can't be a problem in the future, but that
Yeah.
because it's very it's very simple. It's very simple to understand. We burn CO2, a portion of it goes into the atmosphere and gets trapped. Sun rays come down, the heat gets trapped. As this accumulates and as society develops further, so on and so on and so on, right? Like that, you can make cartoons out of that. You can put that on a
Mm-hmm.
poster. You can put it on a shirt. It's not granular. It's just it gives you a very simple overview of how our planet works, and it allows for people to have catchy slogans and
Mm-hmm.
to just make essentially simplify a process that is in effect like actually really really important. Like I never considered, and this is outside of CO2, but I never considered the importance of cloud cover in terms of
Mm-hmm.
keeping the temperature of the planet stable. um And not just that, but also in its in like how water evaporates and the rate of that, and how that is actually something that should also be considered. But there was a news article that I saw that I don't know if it was during the pandemic or when it was, but there was a moment recently where the amount of tankers going across the oceans delivering all the shipping containers and whatnot,
Yeah.
it went down to like a certain level, and all the satellites started noticing like, oh shit, there's like an extremely diminished amount of cloud cover, and this is like raising temperatures in areas where we had never kind of seen this spike before, and that was all just because of like boat traffic, just boats making clouds, which
Yeah.
I never even thought like, oh, that's we're kind of not geoforming. What is the word for it?
Oh,
Um,
like terraforming?
yeah, we're kind of like terraforming the environment in that way with our own
Yeah.
impact. So
Have you
if
ever
I
heard
never,
of
yeah.
the Have you ever heard of the conspiracy theory chemtrails in
Oh
the
yeah,
sky?
yeah, hell yeah, I love
Yeah,
me some
have you
chemtrails.
Yeah. Did you know that it's actually kind of real to an extent? That
Oh,
there are
I've heard of
planes
like
in the sky?
I've heard of like cloud seeding
Yeah,
and
like
they'll
cloud
pump
seeding.
stuff. Yeah. They've been doing that like for decades now. It's nothing new. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. It's just funny to me that there is a point of reality behind that conspiracy. Like, no, not every contrail coming off of a plane is chemicals, and they're not all trying to poison us. But they are injecting chemicals into the atmosphere to try to manipulate the weather so that we get different rainfall in certain areas.
Oh yeah.
That
In
part's real.
I think it's in like in Dubai or somewhere, just like out in the
Yeah,
desert. They make it rain like once a day, or sorry, once every week by shooting some kind of like a formulated silver compound that they use.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
Like, what are the implications of that long term? Who ran that study and just said, yeah, let's do this?
I don't
Let's
know.
just shoot silver into the sky for years and years, and it'll probably be fine, right?
Well, there's
I don't know.
actually,
Maybe it is fun, but
yeah, who knows? But there's actually a guy on I don't know if I'm gonna find him, but he actually does have a company that he's doing like a startup. I think it's called Rainmaker. Um, I could be wrong. I'm gonna see if I can find it. But there's a guy on Teapot that, oh yeah, here it is.
yeah.
Yeah. He did an episode with S3. Uh,
Oh, cool.
Let me see if I can. Oh, he really didn't.
In
Damn.
Genesis.
I would have thought he would have been the first to comment.
And by no means am I opposing cloud seeding. Like, I'm okay with it until we have proof that it's not a good thing. It's probably fine. I just thought that was a funny point to talk about while you were on the note of cloud cover.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like
A lot
I'm
of
all
people
for it. Yeah.
take the environment for granted, like completely. Like, I go to school with a lot of people that hate all the snow we get here. They're like, man, I hate wintertime. It's so long. There's so much snow. But the only thing I can think about whenever I hear people say that is that they just have no understanding of how important it is that it snows and how almost miraculous it is that we have that as a resource. It's like, without snow, we wouldn't be able to have cities in Arizona. That Phoenix just wouldn't exist if we didn't have snow, because there would be no rivers to feed fresh water into remote places like that. And so there's a lot of problems that can come when we have low snow years. Then they end up pumping a lot of water from states like Utah all the way out to California so people in LA can drink our water. Which is another point that I think is kind of goofy, because they have an ocean right there. They should probably just desalinate their own water. But what do I know?
That's another problem for the ages, right? Is figuring that out. Like I don't think anybody's been able to crack that nut uh in a way that's commercially accessible for people, right?
Mhm. I don't know. They do it in Dubai. Their new technology, what they do there, they simplified it actually. They pump the ocean water into these big, like, half sphere things, and they just let the water evaporate, and then it gets collected on these big glass domes. At least I saw a concept for it. I don't know if they've made it like this yet, but they have a concept to use solar energy to just desalinate ocean water to fresh water that you can drink.
If they got plenty of anything, it's sunlight and salt water. So
Yep,
if
they
anyone's
do
gonna
have a
do
lot of
it,
that.
yeah, if anyone's gonna do it, it's gonna be them.
Looks like they've got a pretty big facility there doing it already, so.
Well, some of these are AI. This one looks more real, but this one's definitely AI. That's definitely AI. This,
Yeah,
mm,
that's probably a good picture of it.
yeah.
And they do have some like that in LA. I've seen them before too. But it's cheaper to just pipe it from Utah, I guess. So that's what they do.
Interesting. Okay, because I always assumed that this was something that it was just it hasn't been feasible for the longest time, and we never really took any initiative to do it. But that's yeah, that's good to hear that at least LA is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like there's a point that sometimes comes up in this kind of like environmental doomerism thing where it's like, okay, well, most of the world's fresh water is located up here in Canada, and we share it, it's a couple lakes with the U.S.
Yeah.
And that's going to be like the real battleground if we can't figure out desalination. Is like whoever can control those lakes is going to have so much more just influence economically over everyone else. But if this process takes up, that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah. And honestly, Elon Musk has said this before in interviews, but desalination is insanely cheap if you do it correctly. You can literally just evaporate water and collect it and use solar energy to do it. You don't even need electricity to convert it into fresh water. You can just let the sun do the work for you. So I don't foresee freshwater shortage being a major problem other than in terms of using it for agriculture in deserts. That could be a big problem.
Hmm. So then on the flip side, what is it that you do see, at least from an engineer's perspective, as like the issues around how we deal with the environment as it is?
So thinking of agriculture and how they use water, if you went back probably 30 years ago, a lot of watering systems were just flood systems. So you would just flood your field with water. But then the plants can't absorb the water that quickly. So it wasn't a very efficient way to do it. So a lot of basically everything is switched over to sprinklers now. But a lot of these sprinklers are out in the desert. And so in order to cover a lot of area, you want your sprinkler to be able to spray water super far away. But when it's doing that and it's 100 degrees outside and you're in the desert, you're trying to spray water 30 feet, a lot of that water just ends up flying up into the air and not even making it to the plant. So I see a lot of cool new companies in the Netherlands specifically developing new greenhouse technologies where they've got very controlled systems where they can recycle all of their water, or at least most of their water. And I think that's probably what the future of agriculture needs to move to be more sustainable. Like have farms in big cities, like in these skyscrapers. There's no reason you can't do that with this new technology where you just recycle your water and have LED grow lights, and then you can have fresh food year round in climate controlled environments. And at first, it's going to be a lot more expensive to adopt that technology because sunlight is free, LED lights are not. But if there's ways we can start adopting that and have the market move in that direction, then I think that's a good solution for the future.
Okay, so farming and food supply, that seems to be like a top priority, you think?
Yeah, yep, I think it's undervalued in a lot of people's minds because a lot of people just don't think that deeply about it, and I don't blame them for it. It's just food comes from the supermarket, right?
Hmm.
But In reality, it doesn't. It's trucked hundreds of miles at a minimum to get you good produce to your supermarket, when there's no reason why we can't just have fresh, exotic produce in every small town across the world. If they just build greenhouse pods, then they can control the environment and make fresh food everywhere. A lot of produce and things are taken to these irradiation sites where they treat them with these cobalt sources, which sterilize everything that lives inside the fruit. They kill all the bacteria, and it's a good way to extend the lifespan of produce, because if you kill all the mold spores that live on it, then it's not going to get moldy as quickly, obviously, so they can live in warehouses longer. But there's a resource shortage in that radioactive cobalt that they use, so it's going to become more and more expensive over time to treat these exotic produces. And I think it's just a better solution to grow things locally and have local farmers produce the food.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever. I mean, I've heard the idea be thrown around before. Like, why don't we just set up farms in these cities? There's a lot of buildings that are remaining vacant, so it's just unused space that could actually be used by a farmer. Um, yeah, I mean, my only concern with it is because we're essentially, um, for lack of a better word, playing God with this,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of creating that environment. I always fear, not fear, but it's a concern that like there's just some minute thing that we're not considering, whether it's just something about the way the ecosystem is run or some like tiny mite that actually has like a lot of like a big role to play in these kind of farms. Maybe like the lack of bees, like you can't that, like how are you going to deal with that if you're dealing with like flowering fruits or any flowering plants really. um that would really be my only concern, but as like just as a concept that sounds good to me. I mean, it sure as hell beats whatever the fuck we're doing now, you know? Like all this single crop agriculture for things that are like really just not good for us. Like the amount of
Yeah,
corn that is grown in the US is fucking nuts.
it is crazy. Corn and soybeans, just states full of it.
I wonder what the stat is, at least for the US. 90 million acres.
It's like you can't even wrap your head around that number. That's so much.
Wow.
Like a lot of area.
Everybody has a little. That's the thing. Everybody has a little.
I think a lot of the problems we would run into in the immediate future with adopting all these new technologies is just it's more expensive to do it because it costs more money to plug into the wall and use electricity to run a light bulb than it does to just use the sun. And it will always be more expensive to do that. But I think we could adopt it more quickly if energy was cheaper. Electricity right now, everybody takes it for granted because it is fairly cheap, usually around 15 cents per kilowatt hour. But imagine if it was like 1 millionth of that price. What if it was less than a tenth of a cent of a kilowatt hour per kilowatt hour? And energy was just insanely cheap, that it wasn't a problem to just have super energy intensive equipment running all of the time, like all this new AI stuff that uses so much electricity. Like apparently asking ChatGPT a question costs the same amount in electricity as it does to like have all the lights on in your house for a day. Which might not sound like much, but how many questions do you ask ChatGPT a day? I use it quite a bit. So I know I'm costing that company quite a bit in electricity. And so maybe we should do something about accelerating our energy production footprint so that we can advance and have some new technologies without having such a big barrier to entry.
Yeah, because fundamentally, that has always been like kind of the backbone or like the background force that dictates the acceleration of humanity's growth and evolution. Is how good are we at converting fuel to energy and making that process more and more efficient? And now we've gotten to a point where it's as clean as it's been, at least in the developed nations, in the sense that, yeah, we have coal stacks and, all these coal burning plants in North America, sure, obviously, but it's not like it used to be, in like Victorian age London.
Yeah, and the coal stacks they have here, they have scrubbers in the smokestacks that try to pull all of the carbon out of the air before they vent it into the sky. So, like, we do tons of crazy technologies to try to keep coal burning clean, and they're still going to phase it out. I don't think we'll have any coal power here in the next 20 years. It's just going to be regulated into oblivion, which is okay as long as we can find a good replacement for it. If we can start adopting nuclear energy and solar energy, not wind energy, that is not a good solution.
Definitely not for the birds either.
Yeah, but underground coal fire, I haven't heard of this one.
I was gonna mention we got on the coal. So this I learned about this a couple months back. In the U.S., there is a famous town. Let me see if I can find it. There was a town that was known as a coal mining town, and the deposit was so big that it ran through the entirety of the town essentially. And I guess they one day, I don't remember what the exact incident was, um, but the mine caught on fire, and still to this day, if you go to the town, it's been fully abandoned completely. Nobody lives there. Obviously, they had to evacuate everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
like you'll notice, there's some feeder pipes that were installed to ventilate the mine. If you go near them, they're still warm,
Wow.
and this has been going on for decades. I want to find the actual story.
Yeah, now I'm curious. I want to find that too.
You can go and see
Yeah,
it
that'd be
too. You can go
crazy.
and visit it.
I think there's still some pits in maybe Kuwait or something from Gulf War era where they lit some oil refineries on fire during that war that are just still burning open pits.
Oh yeah, that's the there's one in Kazakhstan
Mm-hmm.
that is like the entrance to hell. But yeah, so this right here, it's
Oh
still
yeah,
burned. This is 2010.
still going.
It's still going. Yeah, which is, I mean,
Yeah.
my God.
Oops, we accidentally lit this part of the Earth on fire for the next 3,000 years.
I
What are you
mean,
gonna do?
look at the reading. It's at 187
Yeah,
Fahrenheit.
crazy.
That is so nuts. I can't believe I never even heard of this. But yeah, there have been some people that are like urban explorers, that will go to these places. Uh, yeah,
Oh,
1 year ago,
that's
this guy just decided to visit, and yeah, they do like a walk around. They check all these
that's cool.
spots. But yeah, there's this. Yeah, here's the pipe. Yeah, they just go to it and they touch it, and yeah, it still feels warm.
That's crazy.
Nuts. Um, but I had a question when we were talking about the farming thing. What
Yeah.
do you make of Bill Gates buying up all that farmland?
Oh man, I don't know what to do about that. I see it as a problem to see his vision for the future, where he's like, everybody's just gonna eat bugs and they're gonna be fine with it, and nobody's gonna own anything and they'll be fine with it, and I can control all this farmland and decide what we grow on it. I don't know that I like his vision for the future, so I'm not very content with the fact that he's purchasing all of that land. But what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I'm very pro capitalism, so I'm not sure what the best solution to that problem is. 1 acre in New Mexico.
I guess he's got a farm down there. I figure
I guess
probably
so. Like, that's where he keeps his garden, I guess.
1 acre. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it either, man. Because I can't take a single word of what he says seriously or honestly, because he does not
Yeah,
strike me as an honest man. Um,
certainly not.
and I mean, the only thing you can do is just win the hearts and minds of people, or just try to convince as many people as possible that this is not a good idea, so they'll act accordingly, and eventually some
Hmm.
change will happen. But there's little you can do with a guy that just has excessive amounts of money to just spend on all this. And yeah, that eat the bugs shit, man. I've heard some developments where apparently, like, the way that food ingredients are listed in certain countries, US being the most famous example, especially recently with the RFK stuff, where he's talked about
Hmm.
how there's no need to list certain ingredients, or you can get around the labeling in some ways. Um, I've heard that, like, they've already started, like, adding crickets and whatnot
They have,
to
yeah.
to food, and it's actually, there was one incident, famous incident I remember, when this vegan lady, she sued Starbucks because she she told them that she was a vegan, and the drink that they gave her was, it had this red dye that was made of crushed bugs.
Hmm.
And so when she found out, she, like, sued them. I don't know why, but I guess she felt compelled to do it.
It's a very liberal American moment right there.
Yeah. just sue someone. Just the hell.
Starbucks and vegan and suing someone and being a Karen about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
It's
I mean,
crazy.
and that dye's been around for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they're figuring out a way to do that with crickets too, which I am not a fan of.
Yeah, if people want to eat bugs, I don't have a problem with it, but maybe at least make it clear when you're selling something that has cricket flour in it that it actually is made of crickets. Because I bought chips, I don't know, like a year ago at the store. Like, these taste kind of weird, and I was looking in the ingredients of them, and it had cricket flour protein
Mm-hmm.
as one of the ingredients on the, like, potato chips. I thought they were potato chips. I guess not. Needless to say, I didn't buy those again, but they didn't have anywhere labeled on the packaging that they had that inside of it until I, like, read 17 ingredients in. Like, oh, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, and you're right. I looked it up here. It's called a cheddar powder or cricket flour and cricket protein. But yeah, it's listed in various ingredients and protein bars, bread, muffin, cookies, pasta. Huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not good. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't want anything to do with that kind of shit. I'm all for, like, free and open markets and
Hmm.
all that. Sure. But Jesus fucking Christ, like, this should not be
There's got to
celebrated.
be some, like, some sense of transparency, especially when it comes to food, right? Like, you're eating this and putting it in your body, you should at least be able to know what is there, right?
I agree. Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's good to see that, like, now that's more of that is coming into the public conversation. Because I was telling all my friends about seed oils like a year ago when I started doing my own reading, and then they're like, "Mark, that sounds retarded. That sounds fucking
Yeah.
retarded." Okay, my parents grew up on this shit. I'm growing up on it. Like, it's fine. It's not gonna fucking
Yep.
kill you. And now RFK is coming out, just
I read a
straight up
study on
swinging.
that. There
Yeah, go
was
ahead.
a study they did on seed oils, and I think it was in mice, where they, like, observed the effects of, like, seed oils versus regular saturated fats like butter and tallow.
Hmm.
And in the mitochondria of the mice, they experienced calcification. So their
Oh.
cells weren't able to produce as much energy when they had been eating seed oils versus when they ate like butter and tallow, they were fine. And the refining process, I don't know if you've done much research on the refining of seed oils, but it just seems so gross to me that it's just commonly accepted. And yeah, like my parents' generation, they wholeheartedly believe that seed oils are more healthy for your body than butter. My mom went to school to be like a home economics professor, so a lot of her classes were on like the food pyramid back when that was being created because she was in charge of teaching that to kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wholeheartedly believes in a lot of that stuff still to this day. And I can't seem to convince her that I know more than her about that for some reason.
I mean, well, because it's such a drastic change. Like I didn't,
Yeah.
at least speaking from my own personal experience, I didn't realize how much of an effect it had on my life until like like tried to actually like actively look at ingredients. And my mom was really good about doing that growing up. You know, always making us read it. We try to eat as much like organic, natural stuff. Like I grew up on porridge. Like I had breakfast
Hmm.
cereal every now and then, but for the most part, because my background is Eastern European, so a lot of eating at
Gotcha.
home, less eating out, a lot of cooking at home. So, uh,
Hmm.
but even then, like it was until like my mid 20s when I started like looking at these labels, and I was like, oh shit, I've just been like putting this in my body the whole time. Fuck, that's not good. Now I have to avoid 90% of the grocery store. I have like
Crazy. Yeah.
two or three aisles, fruit and veg, and then meat, and that's it. That's all I got. Like I can't touch anything else, which is insane. It's
It
just out
really
there.
is crazy.
And
Yeah.
you guys have it
I
worse
completely
too.
agree. Yeah, it's like I would like to try to avoid seed oils and things like that, and I do as much as I can, but I still end up eating it just because I can't really afford to switch to the diet that I would prefer to eat, which is a lot heavier into meat and just vegetables. Vegetables aren't crazy expensive, but yeah, that's quite a picture right there.
Well, brother, like I was gonna
Oreo
say,
flavors,
your
red velvet, that's a good one.
yeah, your snack aisles are fucking nuts, man. Like here's a fucking tier list someone
A
came up
tier
with.
list. What was the best? What was at the top?
Fruit punch.
Fruit punch. That's wild. It's just pure red 40.
No, this one would have to. No, it doesn't have the inside. I thought the inside was red too. That's
Yeah,
Swedish fish. Oh, God.
it's wild and real.
Dude. Oh my God. That's
Yep,
nuts.
that's a problem.
That's nuts.
But yeah, back to like the food pyramid thing. My mom wholeheartedly believes that like eating lots of grains is really good for you because that's what they've recommended. But I find when I eat lots of grains, I feel like shit. Like, and that's what I ate growing up was like whole grain cereal pretty much every day all growing up. And now I hate breakfast because I don't want to eat that anymore. And so I typically just skip that meal and just eat lunch instead. But yeah, just grain, grain, grain. And one of my quickest discoveries in college was that like if I stopped eating grain in the morning, I had a lot more mental clarity throughout my day than when I had like a bagel for breakfast.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've found similar effects as well. Um, in terms of my diet, the biggest switch that I made was like having a high protein breakfast. And like you, like I used to fucking hate breakfast. I used to skip it all the
Hmm.
time and just wait till lunch or like 11 o'clock hit, and then I just go to town on something. Um,
Yeah.
but ever since I switched to like a high protein meal, like in the morning, if it's not like I usually have like 3 eggs and then some yogurt, like high fat, 10%,
Hmm.
a bunch of supplements, and then I don't know, some fruit maybe here and there. But ever since I switched to that, I find that am I can go until 2 p.m. Like if I have breakfast at 8, I can go till 2 p.m. without eating, like no problem. But just fills you up more
Nice.
if you have like a high protein meal to start the day, I find.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, can't have cereals anymore, which kind of
Yeah.
sucks. But eh,
Yeah,
that's a
if I
fine
do
trade off.
cereal, it's like a treat. I don't ever eat it for breakfast anymore because I feel worse when I eat cereal for breakfast than if I just eat nothing for breakfast. Like I do better. So
Mm-hmm.
something about it just doesn't sit right with me. But yeah, food, it's crazy. Do you have any other high protein breakfast foods that you like to eat? Because I'm not the biggest fan of eggs, but I do
Uh,
like yogurt.
highly recommend muesli. You know what muesli is?
Uh-uh.
So muesli is like, because okay, so this idea of breakfast cereals as they are in America, that's just like one category of cereal. There's like
Okay.
oats you can have, like oatmeal. That's technically a cereal.
Mm-hmm.
There's always like different things. You can also have buckwheat. Buckwheat is kind of like here. Let me show you. Buckwheat is traditional, well, Eastern European kind of thing, but it has a lot of it's I would consider it like a superfood
Interesting.
essentially. It has a lot of fiber, a lot of protein, um, and just enough fat. Very, very nutritious. What you do is you essentially make it like rice, so 2-to-1 ratio with water. So 1 cup of
Mm.
buckwheat, 2 cups of water. Boil it the exact same way as rice, um, and from there you can have it. If you want to have it with milk, by all means. Uh, I usually like to have like a little bit of honey and some butter, um,
Sounds pretty good.
salt, like what you essentially you treat it like rice. If you can even have this like as not like a breakfast thing, you can have just like as a side dish. Um, very slept on. Few people know about it. I don't really meet anyone else that's ever like, oh yeah, I fucking love buckwheat. Like unless they're also Russian or Ukrainian or what have you, then like okay, well it's a cultural thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, buckwheat is great.
Yeah, I'll have to give that a try.
Definitely, definitely, highly recommended. Muesli is, I want to say it's Swedish. Um, but it's essentially like a granola bar, except um, in a bowl, basically. So it's got like different oats, nuts, um,
Yeah, it looks a
cranberries.
lot like just granola without the bar part. But the
Yep.
problem is even granola, they put tons of seed oil in that. Like I can't find any that looks any good if it's not full of vegetable oil. So,
Well, if you can find this brand, this is the one that I use. It's Bob's Red Mill, and they have, I think, an organic variant as well. But even their original one, as far as I know, doesn't have any any seed oils. Like it has, yeah, whole grain wheat, rye oats, barley flakes, dates and raisins, almonds,
okay, yeah. We've got
and
that brand
sunflower
here.
seeds. Yeah. Yeah, like this.
Yeah, I'll have to give that a shot.
Yeah, put it in some water, milk. Could have it with yogurt. Um, play around with it. But yeah, no, like that's usually my breakfast. I don't know, I'm kind of autistic with food in that sense because I've been having 3 eggs for breakfast for like, man, I don't even know for how long now. It's been like probably close to 5 years ever since the pandemic began, basically.
Yeah,
I don't get bored of it. Actually, I like it.
that's
It's a
good.
same meal every day basically. I like it. I'm the weird guy that buys like a ton of eggs though at the grocery store. So
Hmm.
like I'll buy like 2 30 packs of eggs. I'd buy
Dang.
more if I could, but I'm afraid that my fridge will not be able to hold it and the shelf is gonna break.
Yeah, I usually buy a 30 pack at Costco because my wife and son eat a lot of eggs. I'm just not adapted to it, so maybe I should just force myself to eat like 6 a day for a few weeks. I bet I would like it if I did that, but then I have to like actually cook in the morning too. Part of me just wants to be lazy and just go to work.
Yeah, no, I get that. Funny enough, I actually used to work as a cook, and one thing I've
Yeah.
learned is eggs are actually among the hardest uh, things to get right because of how easy they are to fuck up.
Mhm.
Because like you would think that like making a good egg is like simple. You just crack it, put it on the skillet, whatever. But no, like it's extremely easy to
You're
like
right.
overcook.
It's delicate, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and all the different ways that you could make it. Um, there's one where you just dump it in boiling water. I forget the name. I think it's yeah, I think
Oh,
it's eggs
like poaching
Benedict.
it?
Poaching, yeah,
Yeah.
poaching. There it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, never been
Yeah,
able
no,
to
I
successfully
puts a
do
little
that.
bit of she puts a little vinegar in the water when she poaches hers and it congeals it a lot better. So you should give that a shot next time you give it a crack.
That's a good tip. That's solid, actually. Yeah, food supply. It's weird. Um,
Hmm.
One thing that I have noticed in terms of like a global trend is that since the war in Ukraine, the grain supply of the world has like diminished by like huge amount,
Hmm.
um, which is really concerning because if that war keeps going on, I mean, I don't know how much of their production has stalled, but I would imagine it's not an insignificant amount. And what happens when we lose one of the bread baskets of the world? Like
Yeah,
that's a bit of a problem.
I really hope that tensions in that area cool off. It's very concerning to see how it's escalating even now. I was pleasantly surprised to see how quickly world leaders were trying to talk to Trump when he got elected about kind of restoring peace in all these conflict areas. And then the next week, you see like Joe Biden authorizing long range missile strikes into the heart of Russia. And I'm like, why are we doing that again? What is this gonna solve for anybody? I don't know. You probably have a closer connection to that side of the world, so I would defer to your perspective on that, I think.
Well, I look, I'm no professional in like or historian in Russian history. My tie to it is this: I was born in an ex-Soviet state, so a
Mm-hmm.
country that used to be part of the Soviet Union, and we lived there for a bit. But right around the time I was born, uh, Soviet Union was failing or had failed by then,
Mm-hmm.
and so we went to Canada because all the professionals were leaving, all the teachers, engineers, like everybody was just trying to fucking clean house.
Yeah.
Um, Primarily because a lot, well, not primarily, but one of the reasons is because uh, the Soviets they kind of colonized a lot of those nations. So when they took them into the Soviet Union, like yes, they didn't erase the culture, but they put Russian culture above everything else
Yeah.
in order to create like a sense of national unity. So naturally, just living there, the treatment that like people would give you as like a quote unquote invader um, was not ideal. So once the kind of like once the Soviet Union fell apart, I was like, all right, well now we got like on top of this failing, all the people around us are just like now openly expressing hate towards us. Which I look fair enough. I get their grievance. I'd be pretty fucking
Mm-hmm.
pissed too. Um, but anyways, so we came here to Canada and basically lived here ever since. I have some family there, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to come and visit. But even besides all that, the way that I see it is the main concern that I have with just where all of this is going. Like I don't really care about like Trump or any of these political forces or any of these giant personalities or any of that because fundamentally to me what matters is the prospect of nuclear war and it only takes one nuke to destroy
Yeah.
everything. And our nukes are way more sophisticated now than they ever have been before. And
Yeah.
so, like, we've come pretty fucking close to ending it all number of times. Um, there was a nuke that was dropped in transit, I think. It was flying over North Carolina or something.
Wow.
Like, have you heard about this?
I don't know if I've heard about that one. I've heard about some mishaps though, and it is scary. But yeah, I would concur with that. I think the main concern with that whole conflict is sparking a nuclear war. And I'm not happy to see with how politicians just completely disregard that fact. And then another issue I have, of course, is just the vast amount of death that's occurring in that area, where there's just hundreds of thousands of people dying. And I just see that as a huge loss of potential for the world, which is not good. And I hope they can come to some sort of peace agreement soon. But yeah, what's this?
I'm right there with you. But so this is the incident that I was referencing with the drop. So in 1958, they were flying it, I guess, in between bases, this bomb that they had, and it fucking dropped in South Carolina.
We're lucky we get to laugh about that.
Well, look, it was unarmed in the sense that it did not have
Yeah.
its nuclear core installed and thus could not
That's
trigger
good.
nuclear detonation, but it still contained 2 tons of high explosives. Oh, and those did detonate. Okay. And they did damage to 6 nearby houses and a church. A crater 70 feet wide and 35 feet deep. Wow.
Oops. Yeah, that's crazy.
So that, and then there's the famous incident of the Russian commander in that submarine who got the alert on, I don't think it would have been radar. I'm not sure what kind of system they would use for that, but they essentially got a false alarm, and the decision was his to make, and thankfully he did not make it because it was some kind of issue with the instrument, some kind of malfunction that led to that signal appearing.
Yeah, I remember that story. That was a close call, and I'm so glad that he made that decision. Or we might not be here today.
Mm-hmm. But that's not even the closest one. I heard of one that this author, I'm gonna see if I can find her because she wrote an amazing book on this whole topic. Annie Jacobson. There, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work. Highly recommended. She's written a lot of books about Area 51, Operation Paperclip, the CIA and Surprise Kill Vanish, the Pentagon and DARPA. Very, very like well researched books. Like she gets some incredible sources to come on the record with her, and some off the record naturally. But amazing writer, and her latest book on
That's
nuclear
pretty
war.
cool.
Yeah, her latest book on nuclear war, she essentially wrote about this incident where somebody had mistakenly inserted a training tape into one of the screens that they use to monitor potential nuclear rockets flying throughout the world with their satellite system. And this training scenario was among like the most difficult that they had set up. They had made it to look as realistic as possible. I don't know how the VHS was somehow misplaced or who put it in. There's not really any clarity on that, but it happened.
It's
And
crazy.
like they went into full gear. They had bombers like on the runway, ready to go, ready to take off. They were about to get the president, because immediately what has to happen is the president has to go inside this plane that is specifically made to essentially just hover in circles for as long as they can so that he can make decisions from the air away from the nuclear fallout until they can, I guess, figure out a way to either refuel or land somewhere. Like it got up to that point where they were almost about to start rushing the president in, and someone eventually figured out that this was a training tape. But like they were this fucking close.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. And I'll say one more thing on the nuclear war thing.
Yeah.
Another detail in her book, she mentioned that because of the way that our geography works, if North Korea launches a rocket to the United States, the path that rocket would have to take would essentially have to fly over. I think they would go directly, not over Russia, but at least like south of Central Asia. And if we got that signal from North Korea saying that they launched, the US would have to retaliate, or at least the president would have to make that decision. And because it has to fly back that same route over Central Asia, the Russians can misinterpret that as a signal that we're launching on them.
Yeah, because it's flying right over them, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And the problem is, North Korea is actually the only nation on the planet that does not disclose when it does its nuclear testing. The only nation. Everybody else like will disclose like, okay, we're doing a test, we're expecting it at this time, it's supposed to be of this size, and you just let everybody know that's the way it's always been. And North Korea is the only nation that's able to just say everyone, fuck you, we're gonna do whatever we want.
Yeah, that's crazy. But on like nuclear powers can be such a destructive force, but on the flip side of things, it is also such an incredible resource that we're just not even using. Like how Germany just turned off all of their nuclear power plants, and now they have to go to Russia to buy natural gas so that they can run their power plants. Or there's like France, who kept all their nuclear power plants up, and now they're pretty energy independent, and they've got a lot of pretty cheap power there. Hope we in the U.S. can start using some more nuclear power. I think that would be a very good thing for us to do. Problem is, it is just so over-regulated that it's incredibly expensive to build these reactors. But I'm happy to see little startup companies try to build those small modular reactors. Oh, you got a post about it.
Well, I found this one guy actually, if you enjoy like realistic like climate science, I don't know if you follow him, Bjorn Lomborg. Highly recommend that you do. This guy, great account. His whole thing is like, I'm trying to remove the doomerism and the hype around this. I'm trying to be as realistic as possible because of how difficult it
That's
is to
good.
chart out these things over an extended period of time. He's very very careful
Mm-hmm.
with his analysis, but his whole approach is like, look, it's not the end of the world. We can still write the course, but we need to do it smart. So his whole thing is about understanding where the best places are to implement these solutions. Like having a bunch of solar plants in London wouldn't really make sense. They don't get a lot of sun.
Yeah.
Putting them up somewhere in Arizona or Texas would be ideal. So he's very excuse me, he's very methodical in that way. So highly recommend checking him out.
Yeah,
Um,
that's very interesting.
but there's this article that I found where when you mentioned that whole thing about Germany, that entire push, from my understanding, at least according to this article, was that the Green Party had actually lied and hidden documents that, when they presented their analysis regarding nuclear power plants, made it look so that removing the plants would actually be an overall good, and they lied about it.
So it's based on a lie too.
Hmm.
Wow, that's awful. Bad decision based on a lie. That is crazy.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
which
nuclear
is nuts.
power is such a crazy energy source. How much energy we can get out of such a small piece of material. There's ways to even recycle nuclear waste now. I've yet to hear a good criticism for modern nuclear power and why we shouldn't do it. Because a lot of the safety skeptics don't understand the new systems that we have that we can use to super eliminate any source of nuclear disaster like we've seen in the past. Like, got so many new technologies and methods we can use to avoid having dangerous situations, but it's still the primary concern of lots of people.
In terms of
Another,
sorry, I was just going to
what
ask
were
in
you
terms of
saying?
recycling. What have you seen in that realm? Because I'm not too clear on how we could reuse that fuel.
Yeah, I saw one paper on how they were able to reuse some of the nuclear fuel, but disposal of nuclear waste in general is what I know more about, and I know that there's significantly less nuclear waste than a lot of people realize. like because it is such a small energy source that we can pull so much energy out of, the cost of disposal space for like a nuclear fuel rod is so much smaller than like a coal-fired power plant or a new natural gas power plant, just in terms of how much land space that it takes up to even just dispose of it. I wish I knew more off the top of my head what methods they can do for recycling, but I know that I read somewhere that they can do some cool new stuff with that.
And in terms of storage, it's mostly just like putting it underground at this point. That's all that we can do with it.
Yeah, so with the waste, they have to like store it in these concrete blocks underground to keep it safe. But I just looked up the nuclear waste recycling. It can be recycled just to make fuel again. So they can take the radioactive waste and use a nuclear reactor to just make more fuel with it, I guess. That's what it looks like. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, I really hope we can accelerate the nuclear power development. That would be very beneficial to everybody.
No, certainly. I mean, especially with all these, all this tech around AI being put online. I mean, the amount of power it would take to make the next exponential leaps forward is only increasing. And the other issue that that also comes to mind is all the EVs that have to get powered by these grids. I mean, one of the things that I've realized is that the reason we can't have all EVs is because like our power grid just is unable to handle that amount of traffic at any given time.
Yeah, the way
Um,
they set up transformers is like they'll set up a transformer for like a cul-de-sac of houses, like a group of 10 or something like that. But if you have electric cars, you need like a transformer per house, which isn't impossible to do. We could scale up and do that, but that is a huge undertaking, and none of the transformers are made in North America. We have to buy them all from China, and they
hmm.
can't make enough to satisfy our need for it. So we need to start building them here and accelerate how quickly we can build them pretty quickly if we want to scale up to using electric cars.
One of the
But the
smallest size
solution
available.
California has is just regulate everybody into having electric cars, which is like skipping a lot of steps in the life cycle, which is why it gets so much criticism. But yeah,
Oh, I was hoping it would give me an image of like what the smallest size right now is, because I don't even know how to like just visualize that.
yeah,
Oh,
those cylinders right there, you see them on the wood power poles, or those green boxes are when they do underground power lines.
mm-hmm.
That's what they look like. A lot of kids in the east coast of the United States probably played around with those green boxes on the ground without realizing that they're massive high voltage transformers.
Oh yeah,
I
I've
know
I've
I
seen them
did at
around here.
least. Yeah.
No, nuclear is definitely the way. I'm all for it. Especially like I've seen a lot of buzz around the building of small portable reactors and how the technology is moving uh, towards that kind of manufacturing. Um, which I mean I don't know much about, but hey, it just to me it just means that like we can just have like more of them, and
Hmm.
you know that can't hurt. I'm sure you could like daisy chain them somehow if I could even use that term properly.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think you could like just have individual power plants for specific neighborhoods. I don't see a problem with that. Yeah, what's your take on like the automation stuff that they're talking about? Have you seen that thing that they're fighting with the union on the ports in America where the union boss doesn't want. He's causing all these strikes because there's a push to automate the ports.
Hmm.
Have you seen what's going on with that?
Yeah, I've seen a couple headlines here and there. I don't think there's a definitive answer to this because like there's what we're talking about is like the dynamics of how technology evolves and at which rate should we force this evolution, because the thing is like automating docks is a pretty fundamental way of reshaping the supply chain
Yeah,
that will have immense downstream effects going forward, and not just on the supply chain, but on the people that are behind it. And look, like with every time that there's an evolution of technology, there's going to be losers. Like at one point,
yeah,
um, I remember reading the story of how like New York used to be all horse-drawn carriages, and
yeah.
the moment that cars came around, you just had this like just absolutely excess supply of horses. And I don't know if they ended up just killing a bunch of them or what, but there were people that were like just straight up paid to go around and collect horse carcasses around the city.
Hmm.
Um,
Another one I
which,
can think of off the top of my head is the whale oil industry.
mm-hmm,
Have you heard about
mm-hmm,
that one? How it just disappeared overnight as soon as we started using petroleum products, and like entire towns just turned into ghost towns because everybody's livelihood revolved around going and killing whales and extracting all the oil out of their bodies. And I'm sure it really sucked to live in one of those towns and just lose your livelihood. But at least we have whales still. If we still had to rely on whale oil, they would have gone extinct. So, like, I view automation as generally a good thing, becoming a more efficient society and trying to automate everything as much as possible. And I don't really like the push towards just protecting those jobs for the sake of just protecting jobs. Like, I'm sympathetic to the people that would lose their jobs. Obviously, it's easy for me to say, yeah, let's just automate when I'm not a dock worker. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure those dock workers would go and find better jobs downstream, and everybody would be more prosperous. So that's why I'm kind of more supportive of automation and advancing this technology.
yeah, no, I'm certainly right there with you. Like it's just it's the price that we pay for shifting industries. And the funny thing about the whale oil story you mentioned there, there's actually there's an episode of with do you know who Mike Rowe is?
Yeah, I do. Dirty jobs, right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. He recently did an episode on the Joe Rogan podcast where they talked about this exact thing. Um
Mm.
where Mike Rowe had I think he was talking about this like outing that they had to a museum or something, but they go and they learn the story about this one um famous ship that just like went out to sea and didn't come back for months, and there were like three people left because they had all eaten each other by the end of it. But the whole process was um yeah, you would just go out for months to sea in these small towns on the coast. All the women would stay back, all the men would go. Um, you just be out there drifting, waiting for whales. You would get into like this small ship that was about, I think it was 20 feet long or so, they said. And
Yeah.
that's a ship that you would use to, like, that's not like the main ship. It's just like that would be like the satellite ship that you go into to actually harpoon
Okay, yeah.
the whale. Um, and then you would just, as soon as you got one, you hook it, you ride it. Um, and they, I forget the reason why they said it, but there's a reason why like the whales wouldn't just like go deeper on the water and take the fishermen down with them. I forget what the reasons, but there was an actual reason. And so you would let the whale tire itself out. Eventually, you would start like dragging it with you, take it to the big ship,
Hmm.
load it up, and then from that point, um, just harvest everything that you could. And before that whole industry, whales were a common sight. They were everywhere. And after that, now it's like it's rare that you see a whale. So even though, like you said, like we didn't hunt them to extinction, well, we came pretty fucking close.
Yeah, we definitely did. We hunted them to the point that it's still fairly likely that we'll see a few more species go extinct just because they won't be able to recover from that.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's just it's part of the dynamic of human civilization. We find another fuel source. We find a way to do it. Like I'm sure that the first guy to invent the hammer was like, "Fuck, I just like killed the rock breaking industry." you know, like I'm sure he
Yeah.
had that concern, but it's a lot
Not sure
better.
he did. I don't know.
It's a lot better to have a metal hammer
Yeah,
than it is to have
definitely.
any kind of shitty tools. So, look, we're in the 21st century. Like, you really want to tell me that we can't find a purpose for these people? Like, in the most prosperous, like, economic and cultural center of the world, can't find a place for these people to go? I find that a little far fetched.
Yeah. The real concern is once they get mass production of humanoid robots up to scale, and then we can actually start using those for menial labor. I think that will be a way bigger displacement of people. That one I can see causing some growing pains, to say the least.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Tuna the other day. Not sure if you know him, but he's
Yeah, I do.
okay. Yeah. So he when we were talking about the robot and automation and all this stuff, the thing that he pointed out to me was that the issue is not it's not in the manufacturing of them. Like we have a robust like factory system worked out where we can like pump these things out. The issue is that the training data that is like that makes up the entire like software for the robots themselves. Um,
Yeah, I fully agree with that statement. It's a
yeah,
way bigger burden to train the robot to do a complex set of diverse tasks than to make a robot, for sure.
exactly. Yeah, and the issue that he mentioned was that in perfect, pristine like testing conditions with you know no spills on the floor or anything, like yeah, sure, the robot can certainly do the task a number of times and repeat it successfully. But what happens when somebody drops a pencil or there's a wind or what have you, like any number of factors that could affect that's when it becomes a problem. So they're still working like the kinks out on that, and it's going to be a while. But when it does hit, as you were saying, yeah, that's going to be a major problem. That like retail work is basically gone, like a good chunk of it. Um, Dock workers or any like heavy lifting, movers. Um, I mean, anything that requires a person, really.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like an overnight switch. I think there's going to be a period of time where we've got to adapt to implementing all these robots into these jobs. But it's a lot cheaper to buy a $30,000 robot than to pay for an employee year over year. So I can see it creating a lot of jobs in the field of robotics, but we're going to have to create new ways of being productive for people. And I'm not sure where that's going to take us, but I'm interested to see what solutions we can come up with for that.
Yeah, that brings to mind because a lot of the applications for rocket technology, at least in what we see in the public eye, it's a lot of demonstrations with SpaceX and what they're doing with the ISS and all the cargo they're shuttling in between us and them. But in terms of like civilian applications, do you see this being implemented at any point? Not at the scale that where it's at right now, but maybe like working on miniaturizing it, or like just do you see like this kind of tech playing out in the day to day eventually?
Yeah, I think eventually for sure. Another big civilian commercial push in space right now is obviously Starlink internet. Like
Mm-hmm.
He's created an industry by sending satellites into space just for high-speed internet connectivity anywhere around the world. But I think we're gonna have to move to a more hardware-centric space, if that makes any sense, as in like industrializing it. If you want to make money in space, you gotta produce something of usable value in space. So there's this one company I saw, they want to build a data center in space. And they're doing that because their conjecture is that the heat transfer in space is free and they can make it in a way that's more efficient than pumping water through a data center here on Earth. And that part I'm kind of skeptical of because I used to work for a satellite company where a big portion of my job was building these thermal storage units where we would build these basically thermal batteries that would act as like kind of like a heat sink that would hold heat energy inside of them so that the satellite could be a more consistent temperature. So unless they have a way to keep their orbit in a certain period of space that they can control the temperature easier, I'm not sure how they're going to come up with a solution to the huge temperature swings that they'll get from being in the sun's radiation path versus in the shade of the Earth. I'm not sure how they're going to solve that problem, and they were kind of flippant in their description of how easy it's going to be. So that makes me a little bit skeptical of how they're going to solve it, but I'm interested to see what they can come up with the space data center thing. Another company that is new, I wish I could remember their name, they're reflecting sunlight using giant mirrors on satellites. So in the middle of the night, you can like request one of their satellites to make it sunny in a certain area.
I've heard of that company. I know exactly the one you're talking about.
Interesting. I'm not sure how, like, what practical solutions they can provide with that. Yeah, Reflect Orbital. That's them.
Did you see the spoof video that they had? No, dude, that shit looked so real. It's like I gotta see if I can find it. It was fucking hilarious. They made it so that like it looked like you could actually control it with an app. I don't think it's this one though. No. Jesus Christ. That fucking audio killed me. Let me see if I can find the video. It was fucking incredible. They made it look so real.
Reserve a spot of light.
That's a wild idea. Oh, here it is. Here it is.
A wild idea.
Orbital
Here it is.
has a new lighting service where you can like play with the spot.
Oh,
but
awesome.
yeah, watch this. Just bring it over to us here. Isn't that crazy?
Okay.
No way.
So everyone was like, "Oh, I'm gonna use this on my ops."
It definitely. Use it on your ops. Helicopters coming to get you.
Yeah, dude. Could you imagine? Just like you have a vendetta with someone, so you're like, "Yo, this motherfucker, he ain't sleeping. I'm gonna make sure of it."
Like your house is light all the time now. That's
yeah.
funny.
Well, this was a
Yeah,
spoof.
it's an interesting application. But I think we need to come up with more realistic applications for commercializing space. I think it's a cool idea to start mining things in space. And there's a lot of skepticism around that idea because of how expensive it is to get to space and start your industry in space. Like going to the moon and starting mining, there's such a huge barrier to entry to doing it. That's the reason nobody's done it yet, because it's just so much cheaper to do it here that it doesn't make economical sense. But there's also some pretty cool resources out there that we could go and utilize for some cool things, like titanium. We have to I'm pretty sure the majority of titanium that we can get on Earth right now is in Russia. So that obviously makes it a conflict mineral.
Hmm.
But titanium is a really useful material because of how lightweight and strong it is. So there's probably some new applications and technologies we could develop if we had these exotic materials available to us more cheaply in a more regular form. So I'm very pro space mining, but I also see why it doesn't exist yet. But I look forward to the day that it does.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of the moon, what's your reasoning on why we haven't gone back?
So we haven't gone back to the moon because there's a huge loss of talent at NASA after the first moon program. And I don't know if you've heard people say, like, we just forgot how to go back. There's some truth to that. There's a big loss of practical knowledge after that program ended. And there's a reason the space shuttle just used the old rocket technologies, and SLS is based on the space shuttle rockets. So there just hasn't been a lot of new, fresh developments at NASA, which is unfortunate to see. And another problem that NASA has had is they've gotten really bogged down with bureaucracy, and they haven't been incentivized to produce these cool missions like they used to, which is unfortunate because I think they could be capable of it again. So one of our contracts I work on with NASA right now, I'll send you a link for it actually. I'll show you my NASA project and it'll kind of tie in.
Sure.
Let's see. So this is the project that I've been working a lot on recently. It's called Plume Surface Interaction. So since the discovery of water on the poles of the moon, a lot of people are interested in landing, like putting landers or people or colonies on the poles of the moon. One of the problems with that is the craters that they want to land in on the poles of the moon, they're constantly shaded in the bottom of the crater, but at the top of the crater it's constantly exposed to sunlight. So the problem with that is it's exposed to two different types of ionizing radiation. So the dust on the top of the crater has a different charge than the dust at the bottom of the crater. And because they've been sitting there undisturbed for thousands of years, they're very electrostatically different from the top to the bottom. So when they try to do these flow simulations of what would happen if they land in one of those craters, is that the dust just looks like a river flowing out of the crater and then flowing into the crater from the top. And they're worried it's going to flip their landers over and destroy all their instruments and just crush everything that tries to land there. So based on their simulations, it looks like it's going to be a hard task to do. But like I said earlier, every simulation is wrong. You don't know exactly what's going to happen until you do it. So this project is a way to try to simulate that landing in a more realistic sense. So the rockets I've been developing at the laboratory here, they're going to use them in a big vacuum chamber with this simulated moon dust that carries the similar charges to actually observe the behavior of that dust. Now obviously the gravity is different here on Earth, so it's still going to be a simulation. It won't be like an exact replication of what would happen on the moon, but we can get a better idea of how safe it will be to land in those craters on the moon. So yeah, that's one of the big projects I've been working on, is this plume surface interaction problem. They're worried about how the rocket plume is going to affect the moon dust on landing, and they want to make sure that it's safe to land in these craters like they want to. So, working with NASA on this project, I've kind of gotten a little bit of an insight onto how typical projects work at NASA and how the engineers just handle problems and what they do because I've interacted with them. And they're not super incentivized to get this done quickly and efficiently. They're more concerned with the safety and quality of their data. And I don't know, they just don't have a boss who's financially incentivized to get this project done. So they end up kind of, in my opinion, dragging things out to an extent that's a little bit ridiculous. Like, they keep trying to refine our data and changing the scope of our project throughout this whole project. And we get everything ready to deliver, and then they'll raise a new issue, and we have to change things for what they want to see differently. And so part of the problem I see with NASA is that they don't have like a capitalistic financial incentive to complete their projects in a reasonable amount of time. And I think the whole world can see that with the Artemis missions and how significantly delayed they have become and how ridiculously over budget they are now. I don't know how much you know about the SLS rocket and how over budget it is, but it is pretty ridiculous how many delays and budget extensions that they've had to deal with for that. We were supposed to have boots on the moon, I think in 2020 was their first announcement, and now it's 2024. They've only launched one phase of it, and they've postponed their second phase again last week, I think. So, like, it's a cool project, and I'm supportive of the Artemis project. I want them to do it. I just want them to do it on time and more cost effectively than they are. And because it's a government agency, they're not financially incentivized to getting it done. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, no, it certainly does, and it doesn't surprise me that there's this kind of lagging effect um, with just how fast things could be done if the incentives were aligned in terms of how it is done now. Because I mean, with the space race, that was a huge point of national pride to the point where, from my knowledge, both in the U.S. and the Soviet Union, they invested millions upon millions, not just into these programs that were building the rockets, but also into education programs, high school courses, universities, trying to create a cultural wave of people that were excited about space. They had shifted their PR and propaganda wings of both the army and the media. Like it just everything was, it seemed
Yeah,
unified.
everything lined up. Yeah,
Hmm.
and they had a mission that they were trying to complete. And yeah,
Yeah.
if you look at the launches for the Apollo missions, they were like back to back to back. Apollo 9, Apollo 10, Apollo 11, Apollo 12. All of those were in the space of 6 months, all on Saturn V rockets, which are way huge. It's like March, they launched Apollo 9. May, they launched Apollo 10. July, they launched 11. November, they launched 12. So they were getting stuff done back then, and they were motivated to do it because they were trying to race with another country. But then if you look at the Artemis launch schedule, they've launched once. It was like something like 3 to 5 years later than they were originally expecting. And it wasn't crewed. It was just a test, which is a good place to start. And they've just had a slew of problems. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that they're relying on these legacy space companies like Boeing and Lockheed to develop their rockets and kind of run the hardware development of their missions, and those companies are incentivized to drag it out as long as possible because they've got these cost plus contracts. So if they run over schedule, they get more money. So they're not very incentivized to getting it done on time because they can just make it last longer, and then their contracts get automatic extensions and they get billions and billions more dollars. So why would you want to get your rocket done on time, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's even in the microcosm. That's how construction sites work. There was famously, I think it was called the Pit, construction site in. Let me see if I can find it. Uh, it essentially ended up being a giant hole. I think it was in Boston. Famous construction site called the Pit, and the whole thing was basically, as you said, just bloated costs and I think is this no, not the Berkeley Pit. Might not be able to find it, but yeah, it lasted on for like I think 2 decades or something like that, and the hundreds of millions of dollars just went into it, and it was all just about exchanging hands to the right people.
Mhm.
And if that can happen in construction, like let's be real, that can happen anywhere.
Yeah. Yep. So I think they need to undergo a realignment of incentives over at NASA, and then we can see some more progress over there. So I'm happy to see that we've got this push in the government in America right now to increase efficiency, and I hope it's got some positive outcomes in the near future. Because I would really like to see some more progress over at NASA because it directly affects me. I want to work in that industry and I want to see them accomplish more things and develop more quickly. So
Do you do you think that you would ever jump ship to SpaceX? Would you ever be in a position to do that?
yeah, I would love to go work at SpaceX. That's actually a goal of mine to someday end up working for their propulsion teams. I hope that I can end up there someday. I think my values align pretty well with their company culture from what I know, and I'm very excited to see all the developments that they've made recently, and I hope that I can go there and contribute to their mission someday.
Yeah, because it seems as though they've really just. Oh, it's hard to find a competitor like fucking Elon Musk or someone on his level. They've just completely dominated that whole space to the point where they've had to fucking clean up after Boeing. Um,
Yeah,
which is that story was nuts when I heard that these two astronauts were going to be because they've come home since, right? Like they're not still up there, are they?
I'm pretty sure they're still up there.
Huh. Interesting. Well, in any case, I heard
Double
that
check
yeah,
on that.
SpaceX hold on, the astronauts from the Boeing flight still stuck.
Yep, they got delayed again. Which honestly, I feel like if I was an astronaut going to ISS and I was scheduled to be there for a week and it got postponed 6 months, I think I would be pretty excited about that. Maybe that's just me, but I would be pretty happy to spend a longer time in space and hang out there. And I've got a feeling that they're not feeling too sore about getting stuck there like all the media has blown it up to be. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah, I mean, who really knows? But you know, the way that we understand stories is by placing ourselves into them, and I think a lot of people naturally, because there's such a stringent selection process for astronauts, because they really have to make sure you're not claustrophobic, um, among other things, right? Um, that like most of us, when we think about that, that would be terrifying. Like I, if
yeah.
for me, what it um, is when you're in a confined space, the way that your ears adjust to being like a constant reminder of just how the air and everything is moving around you, that you feel in an enclosed space at all times. I think that would get to me more than anything, because you can just close your eyes and like, oh, I'm not looking at it, so it's not there. But
Mhm.
that innate feeling that your body has. That doesn't go away. I don't know, man. If I was gonna go to a spaceship, it's gotta have like high ceilings. Okay.
Yeah, gotta be a big one for you.
No, dude, I could not. Just seeing the way that. Let me see if I can pull up some footage because, man, they utilize every square inch that they can
Yep, it's
to just use
expensive to
it.
get that stuff up there, so they squeeze it in, that's for sure. I
Which,
think
I
the
mean,
hardest
that.
adjustment for me would be like just getting used to the feeling of falling constantly.
Oh, is that what the weightlessness feels like, basically?
Yeah, because that's basically what the space station is doing. It's falling at, it still experiences 90% of the gravity of the Earth. It's just falling in a circle around the Earth because it has so much momentum that it just stays there. And it gets barely any drag because it's almost completely out of the atmosphere. So it can just fall forever almost. The orbit decays a little bit because it's still running into particles and that's producing drag and slowing it down some. But I don't know if you've ever rode a drop tower like at a theme park or something, but those ones always would mess with me the worst out of all the roller coasters, and I can't imagine trying to sleep while feeling that. But that's what they do. Gotta deal with it.
I mean, just looking at it, man, God, that's such a beautiful picture.
It is, and it's moving 4.7 miles a second.
Oh yeah, no, I was lucky enough to actually
So fast.
my brother he's really into stargazing,
Yeah,
and one time we met up with this guy who had like an automatic telescope that would follow certain stars based on GPS, and
that's cool.
he set it up to the ISS, and man, watching that
Things
thing
cruising,
whiz,
right?
holy fuck, the thing was moving. My God, it was beautiful. Just even that little glimpse that I got of it, I was like, wow, there's fucking people up there, man. That's so cool.
Yeah, 17,000 miles an hour. They're flying through space. It's just
My God,
mind-bending to even think about that.
incredible. It's
So
nothing
much.
short of extraordinary, man.
It is. It's exciting stuff.
But yeah, where's that tour?
Yeah, I want to see the inside. Look at all that.
Wow. Oh, cool. I don't have to worry about putting my hair up. That's awesome.
No,
Hell yeah.
that's funny.
Actually, funnily enough, the Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield,
Uh-oh.
he has a pet dog that he's taken to the veterinary clinic where I work at. I've never seen him, but apparently he hangs around sometimes.
Yeah, hopefully you get to run into him someday and ask. We had a astronaut come into my school last year and talk to us just about what it was like. And he was actually a commander of the space shuttle. So he was not only a fighter pilot, but he got to pilot the space plane that we used to have here.
Ooh.
He would tell us all these crazy stories about it. Man, what an experience to fly a spaceship. Must be crazy. I hope I get to do that someday.
Oh yeah, then you got to deal with all the eating.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's
The
liquid.
weird cups they have to drink out of.
Or going to the bathroom.
Oh yeah, that part. Yeah, it looks weird to brush your teeth there. It's all the surface tension of the water just holding it to the toothbrush.
Or even like taking a shower, because from what I know, they wear a bodysuit for it. It's like they just get into this like
Yeah.
plastic thing and they just wash themselves inside of it.
Things we take for granted here on Earth, right?
Would it be possible to have artificial gravity, or is that sci-fi?
there is an easy way to do a cheater form of artificial gravity where you just have a lot of angular momentum just rotating around a center mass on a starship. So like if you think about, I don't know if you were ever a kid holding groceries, if you would ever swing the bag in a circle and it would just hold it tense. If you spin something around with enough angular momentum like that, then you could simulate gravity in the sense that you have an acceleration holding you to the outer edge. So I think there's some movies where they've got similar systems like that, but that is realistic. You could do something like that. But the whole like flip a switch and you have gravity, I don't know about that one. That's gonna need probably a few hundred years of material science and some dark matter stuff to figure something like that out. That part's just sci-fi basically.
Well, even with the rotating, as you said, like there's no way to make a ship that could do that and not pulverize everyone inside of it.
I think you could do that, yeah. I don't think that would pulverize everybody inside if you got the spinning rate down.
Because this is the ship that they used in that movie Stowaway, and it had that exact it has that
Spinning
exact
configuration.
yeah, it has that exact principle essentially. Yeah.
I think they even had that in Interstellar at the end of it, like a massive spinning spaceship.
Oh yes, yeah, and I think The Martian also had something similar.
Or like the Halo rings from those video games.
What do you make
it would
of
take a lot of
those?
energy. If you spin it fast enough, it would work, but it would take a whole lot of energy to do that. So I think we're a long ways away, but it is possible theoretically.
So you're saying that even like, let's say, in like just this example, if like there's just a ring floating, just outside of our atmosphere, all around the Earth, even with our best like rocket technology, like there would still be a limit on the speed? Because I just assumed that it would just keep accelerating until the speed gets higher and higher and higher. It's just like at the rate of which it increases. So you're telling me that there's a limit to that.
So you have to expend energy to get it moving in the first place, right? And when you have that much mass that you have to push into that speed, that's an enormous undertaking. Like, just thinking about how big this International Space Station is. Now try picturing something that big that stretches all the way around the Earth. And then you gotta spin it way faster than the actual space station is going to get enough angular momentum to be able to like observe the effects of something similar to gravity. It's theoretically possible, but it would just consume so much energy that right now it's probably not practical to build something like that. Something like that spaceship, on the other hand, that's a lot more practical. It would still be super energy intensive to try to do an artificial gravity ring like that, but it's more practical than trying to build like a Halo ring, if that makes sense.
I see. Yeah, because I assume that because space is a vacuum, that you would just simply be able um, to just accelerate as fast as you want. But I'm not also considering like gravitational pull or any of the number of forces that I'm ignoring because I just like this is not my wheelhouse at all. So I'm glad that you could
No.
debunk that.
It's hard to wrap your head around these things. I took orbital mechanics this semester, and it's interesting to think about how all the forces work on the solar system scale. Like, the sun right now has a stronger gravitational force on our body than the Earth does. And we're on the surface of the Earth. But the sun's pulling on us harder than the Earth is. That's hard to think about because you'd intuitively imagine that you would just fly off the Earth towards the sun, right? But we don't, because the Earth also experiences that force, and we're just that force is stored in the orbit that we're flying around the sun with. So yeah, it's really weird to think about the numbers of that and do the math of it because it's not super intuitive. Because we think about things on a completely different scale than the scale of the solar system. It's really interesting though.
Well, if I can pick your brain a little more of these
Yeah.
weird ideas, so because right now in terms of travel, the time it takes to get to Mars is like 6 months, something like that.
Yeah, something on that scale.
Yeah, so 6 months, and the
I think it's
launch
actually
window.
9 months, but
Yeah, and the launch window comes on Earth every 2 years, is it?
yeah, so the synodic period is about 2 years, yeah.
Right,
And it is a 9-month travel time right now.
and on top of that, there's only a select few locations on Earth where it is actually beneficial to launch these rockets out off of, from my understanding as well, right? That's why like there's all these specific locations chosen for that.
Yeah, so you want to be as close to the equator as possible because that's where you have the most angular momentum to take advantage of when you're flying off the Earth. So if you think about how the Earth spins on its axis, you're kind of spinning along the surface of the Earth too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the closer you go to the center of that sphere, the more quickly you're moving. Whereas at the top, if you think about like how a basketball could be spun on a finger, at the top your finger just sits there, but if you're at the outer edge and you tried to stick something to it, it would just come flying off the basketball, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotcha.
So the closer you are to the equator, the more momentum you can take advantage of and just let the Earth kind of throw you off into space. So that's why like SpaceX's launch facility in Boca Chica is like basically as far south as you can possibly go in Texas, because that's where they can take advantage of the Earth the most. And that's also why like Kennedy Space Center is super far south down in Florida, so they can take more advantage of the Earth. It's like, oh, that's the one in
that's Puerto Rico.
That's the wrong one. There you go. Yeah, it's like Mexico right there.
Oh yeah, it's like literally right. Oh wow.
Like you can watch the launches from Mexico because how far south they are. Because that's the closest they can get to the equator and still be in the US.
So ideally, the best space programs would be here.
Yeah, definitely. Like a Kenya space program would probably work pretty well. They wouldn't have to have so much propellant to get into space. Obviously, you can see the problems with that.
And Indonesia too, Singapore.
Yeah, which they probably have more potential to actually build a space program because they're a little more prosperous countries than Kenya. But
Interesting. So my question with all that considered is, in regards to like actually realistically getting people on Mars, for the trip, is it important to have the development and procurement of cryogenic technology? Is it necessarily like essential? Because like, what does the actual colonization look like? Because I've heard Elon Musk say that like in an ideal world, it would be great if we could launch 2 nukes at either poles of Mars so that we can start revitalizing its lost atmosphere, so that we wouldn't have a need to carry and also find ways to produce oxygen when we land immediately, because that would be the primary concern.
yeah.
Well, just in its first initial steps, from what you understand about it, what does that actually look like the actual colonization efforts?
So the first steps is, you're right, we got to get life support production happening quickly on Mars. And so you want to do that somewhere where there's water. So you want to send some robots ahead of time to start setting up the solar panel farms and building some infrastructure for people. And so you want to send robots ahead of time to get some facilities going before you send people there. And then you can send people there, and the first wave will likely be just also developing infrastructure and trying to make a habitable base. But yeah, you're probably gonna have to be awake the entire 9 months. I don't think there's a realistic cryosleep technology development happening unless I just haven't heard of it. So you're
Mhm.
gonna have to just live a life on Starship kind of similar to what you would do on the ISS for those 9 months. You're just floating through the vacuum of space and crossing your fingers that nothing catastrophic happens and to make it all the way there safely. So the barrier to leaving Mars's atmosphere is a lot lower because there's less gravity and you don't have to push through so much air. So that's why
Mhm.
Starship can fly back without the super heavy booster on the bottom of it from Mars, or at least that's the intention eventually. I'm not sure if they've got it worked out like that yet. I assume they do. Another thing why you would want water on Mars is because you can make rocket fuel out of water. You can
What?
run a current through an anode and a cathode and then split the water molecules, which are hydrogen and oxygen, into hydrogen and oxygen separately. So then you can either take that hydrogen and make CH4 out of it, which is methane, which is what the rocket fuel is that they use, or you could design a rocket to run on just straight hydrogen, which there are some rockets that have done that before. It's just kind of hard to work with. So that's one of the reasons you'd want to go live somewhere close to the poles on Mars, is so you could have a way to make fuel so you can come home.
Interesting. So we have the infrastructure set up by the robots, and
Mm-hmm.
let's say we land and we have a steady stream of people going back and forth so as to not overextend anybody. Um, which that on its own would be quite an endeavor because I mean finding 5 people to go to Mars once, is one thing, an enormous task on its own, and then now you have to find like rotating shifts so that like every I don't know like month or 3 or however they would want to split it up, you just have a constant like rotation of people going. What do we?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think the intention is, if I understand correctly, but the first set of colonists that they intend to send there will go with the understanding that it is not guaranteed that they will come back. There is a more likely scenario that they will go there and just stay there for the rest of their life because they're not sure they're going to be able to make it home,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably why it works a little better to do this as a SpaceX mission than a NASA mission, because a NASA mission, their primary goal is like the safety of the passengers and making sure that they come home, and that's another reason why they've been so slow. But for a colonization effort, these people are going there to build cities there. And I think the volunteers initially will have to understand that the fact that they're just going to dedicate the rest of their life to this and they're going to have to be okay with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it certainly does. Um, and in terms of like what would be developed, like let's say like we get the energy infrastructure and everything set up by robots. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
the point then is to what just keep building out infrastructure like they did at the beginning of Avatar 2, just completely mow down as much as possible, like mine as much as possible, create as many roads, and so on and so forth. Or like,
Yeah, I
what
think it
would the
would be a
objective be?
race to self-sufficiency. Like you want to get self-sufficient as quickly as possible. So if the shipments from Earth stop coming, you don't just slowly freeze to death, which is a big challenge. You'd have to develop like a food system and a self-sustaining economy there, which is a huge undertaking. Really difficult thing to do. But the first thing would be like next steps after life support would basically be agriculture. Like you got to get your own food source after you get your water source, which is a challenge because if you think about on Earth, like the dirt Earth, it's all organic matter. If you go look at it, it's broken down, decomposed life. On Mars, it's all mineral. So it's like pulverized glass, basically. That's what the sand is there. It's just, they call it regolith, kind of like on the moon, because it doesn't have a layer of organic material. So plants are used to growing in organic material that's alive, that has all these supporting nutrients they can extract out of it. If you try to just plant stuff on Mars, it's not going to be that simple. I think you're going to have to mix some dirt from Earth back home and start developing soil on Mars that you can use for agriculture there. So that's going to be a big challenge. That would probably be step 2 after getting water and oxygen generation online.
Interesting. I never thought about the surface of Mars as just being a bunch of crushed glass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like broken down minerals. Unless maybe we'll go there and be surprised and find a bunch of organic matter. But I think that's probably unlikely because we've sent rovers there before that have done some chemical analysis and haven't found an abundance of organic material. But you never know. Maybe there was life there at some point and we'll have some organic material to work with.
In our lifetime, how far do you think we can get with the timeline as it is now?
It's kind of dependent on politics, unfortunately. I think it just depends on how quickly regulatory agencies can lift the overburdening restrictions that are suffocating our country right now. Because right now, if things stay as is, it will probably be on the scale of multiple decades, which is risky because who knows what our country's going to look like in 3 decades. I think it would be a better thing if we could get stuff sent out rapidly, like in the next 4 years, maybe 26, sending some robotics up there to get some stuff going. And then Elon says 28, I think, is the year that he wants to send the first people. And everybody says he's like, everybody rolls their eyes when they hear an Elon Musk prediction of when something's going to get delivered. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's unlikely, but I think it's more likely that it will happen around 2030. But at the very least, I think it's likely we'll see robotics setting this stuff up before the end of this decade.
Yeah, and as AI continues to evolve, it's just going to become that much easier to not only automate a lot of these processes, but also find ways to improve upon them. So the rate of change and evolution just exponentially increases, like year to year, month to month, week to week. Because even right now, like we're still in the infancy stages of it all. Like I've really only started paying attention to SpaceX in the last, I think, year or two or so. Mainly because it's fucking cool how I can work my stupid little fucking desk job and then I can just open like a little tab and I can see a live stream of the culmination of like thousands of years of human ingenuity, which has reached this final point where we live in the present, and you can just sit there like drinking your shitty coffee or whatever, and looking at just this absolute glorious thing leaving Earth. You can't help but just be dumbstruck by it. Like I don't know. I just every time I see like any footage, especially live, it's incredible. I still can't. I hate that I missed the arm catch live. Man, I forget what I was doing that day, but I couldn't I didn't get a chance to see it, but
I woke up at like 4 a.m. so that I could watch that, and I'm glad I did. It was pretty awesome.
yeah, I fucking bet it's incredible. Every time I look at something, any footage, any image of it, it fills me with this like sense of, I don't know, hope and wonder and possibility. And nothing but positive feelings. I love it. I'm all for it. We need to accelerate that, 100%.
Yep, completely agree on that. Yeah, it's exciting stuff that they're doing over there. I hope I can get involved with them someday. I gotta finish school first, though. That's main priority right now. Get this stuff done so that I can move out to the real world.
Yeah, and in terms of like the application process for SpaceX, what does it look like for you?
It looks incredibly competitive for me. From the engineers that I've talked to that actually work there, one guy said that he applied like 60 times before he got an interview, and then he was pretty lucky to get through the interview process because it was pretty intensive. But I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep trying repeatedly. I'm not going to throw all my eggs in that basket. I'm likely going to have to end up working at some other company for a while, but it would be pretty awesome if I could just land a job at SpaceX after I graduate. I would be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I hope you get
That
it,
would be
man.
ideal. Thanks.
It's
I
a,
hope so too.
it's a hell of a fucking dream, man. That's amazing. In terms of its competitors, do you think any of the ones that are currently on the market right now are worth their salt? Like, what is it? Blue Origin,
Yeah.
I think it's Jeff Bezos one.
So they've got a different approach to how they're developing their rocket, which is a little more traditional, and they're taking things a lot slower and doing stuff more methodically and less iterative engineering and more like ahead of time engineering, if that makes sense. So they're heavy planning, trying to make sure that nothing goes wrong, whereas SpaceX is more, let's get this done as quickly as possible so that we can start iterating our problems away. So Blue Origin, I think they're doing good work there. I think they're developing some interesting stuff, and they've got some cool hardware rolling out. I think they're getting ready to launch their new Glenn rocket here pretty soon. Read something about that. Let's see. Yep, they're doing some pre-launch testing for it right now. So that'll be cool once they get that thing up and running. But the problem is a lot of these other rockets that are developing are less powerful than like a Falcon 9. So I think New Glenn is more powerful than a Falcon 9, but a lot of the other competitors like the Electron rocket and some other companies, they're just not as capable as a Falcon 9 is, and they end up being more expensive than a Falcon 9 is because they don't have the infrastructure to build them so rapidly, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a problem that a lot of companies are at right now. They're just less developed than SpaceX is, and it's really difficult to compete with them because they've got such a good head start now because they've put so many years of effort into developing their rockets. So they've got some challenges to overcome. I think they should all keep trying because more competition is always a good thing and makes things better. And I think even SpaceX is supportive of having fair competition. At least for right now, they are. Yeah.
And in terms of the all the various international space organizations, besides Russia and China, I guess too, are there any other heavy hitters on the horizon that are kind of coming up as they're developing their programs?
Yeah, so in Europe, one of the big things they announced in the last 2 weeks is that they're doing a new constellation of satellites in the EU, and their goal is to compete with, I guess, compete with SpaceX's Starlink satellites. But anyways, they're trying to flesh out they're trying to flex their space muscles and get a better infrastructure, which I am supportive of. But when I saw their price tag on it and how many satellites they were getting for it, I thought that was kind of insane. 10 billion euros for like 290 satellites, which probably doesn't mean much to most people that aren't in tune with the industry, but that's a lot more expensive than what we work with here in the US. So I'm supportive of them trying to develop their infrastructure, and I want them to do it. I just think that's kind of wild how much money they have to spend just to get that level of infrastructure. But hopefully that moves things in the right direction for them. In Japan, they're also a fairly big spender on space stuff. I actually got an internship offer to go work there for a company this summer where they're trying to develop some hybrid rockets for use in space, which is kind of novel. A lot of hybrid rockets have not been used in space yet. So that would be cool if I could go work with them on that. But yeah, as far as heavy hitters go, it's nothing compared to the US. We spend a significantly larger amount on space than any other country. It's an interesting list it produced there. $25 a year.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Oh, billion.
It's
Oh, because
billion, yeah.
yeah,
That
some
makes
of
more
them are.
sense.
Yeah, some of them are not adjusted for that.
Oh, UAE. I didn't even know they had that much. That's cool. New Zealand actually is where, what are they called? Rocket Lab. Yeah. Wholly owned New Zealand subsidiary. So they've got a fairly successful program. They've launched, I think it was 10 Electron rockets this year.
What's an Electron rocket?
They're a smaller rocket. That's it right there. That's it. So it's smaller than a Falcon 9. 14 this year is what it looks like. So yeah, they're trying to compete with SpaceX and develop more rockets to do that. Looks like they're doing a good job of it. They're growing quite a bit year over year, so
Interesting
company, yeah. I think they're developing a larger rocket too. But yeah, it's hard to compete with SpaceX because they've got such a big head start and they're such a rapid iteration company. Yep, there's their medium launch vehicle they're developing. Neutron. But I think even Neutron is not as capable as a Falcon 9.
Interesting. Kind of a stupid question, but
Yeah.
why is it that like is there gonna be a point where the atmosphere is so saturated with satellites and space junk and all this floating debris that it's gonna become a problem?
So it's kind of a problem and it's kind of not a problem. If you think about the surface area of the Earth and then just how massive that is, and when you go up a few miles, it's even more surface area in orbit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the number of satellites we have up there, every time you see how many dots is up there, it looks like a ton because there is a lot of satellites in space, but each one of those dots is so microscopic that it's really not as big of an issue as it's made out to be. But because there's common paths and orbits, there are issues where they could intersect. So there's a big push in rocketry and satellite manufacturers to have deorbit mechanisms for end of life. So once their satellite is no longer operational, they want to have a small rocket on the satellite that they can ignite and push the satellite out of its orbit and into the atmosphere so it'll just burn up and re-enter and not just float and be junk in space. So that's one application of the rockets that I've been developing. Yeah, if you look at that map, it looks like a ton, right?
Holy shit.
And that is a plot of all the satellites in space. But each one of those dots is way, way out of scale. One of those dots is way too big to be an actual satellite.
Well, they're the size of
So
like a
way
small
smaller.
country.
Yeah, and they're definitely not the size of a small country. So it looks worse than it actually is, but there is a lot up there, and there is potential for intersects because there's some common pathways that satellites want to follow. So there's some new research going on of satellite interception, and a lot of it's funded by the Department of Defense because they want to be able to intersect with other countries' satellites. But there's potential that you could send satellites up there to catch old ones and just throw them into the atmosphere and just destroy them, basically. So there's solutions to the problem being developed, is basically what I'm trying to say by that.
Wow. That is a lot more than I thought there would be. Wow. Yeah, that's intense. Because one of the problems that I heard is that the problem with the space junk is that some of it gets so small and so sharp and so deadly that at the speeds that it's going, it can just puncture a small BB-sized hole in the hull of a ship. And well,
Yeah.
I hope you got good sealing tech, because unless that can activate like in a sci-fi movie like immediately, then fuck, that's like the submarine explosion basically. No.
Mm-hmm. It's not as serious as the submarine explosion because there's way less pressure difference going into space than like going underwater.
Oh.
I think we're like what 14 psi here on Earth, right? What's atmospheric psi? So it's like 14 psi on Earth, and when you go to space, that goes to 0. So you've got a pressure difference of 14 pounds per square inch. Whereas that submarine that crushed itself was like thousands and thousands of psi pressure difference. So it basically eviscerated them immediately. Whereas if you get a hole punched in your spacecraft, it's not a good thing. I'm not saying that, but it's more manageable than getting a stress crack in that Ocean Gate submarine. That was a lot more catastrophic. So
that's not as bad. That puts my mind at ease.
And you're right, though. It is a problem to have them intersect. I think there's some space junk that's recently collided with the ISS, and they've got some leaking modules right now that they've. Last I read, they were still working on trying to fix those. But it doesn't mean instant death, usually.
Speaking of the ISS,
Incident. Oh boy.
This is a bit of a interesting story. That okay, so I initially saw the original post on 4chan, and somebody was like, "Guys, like you have no idea. This is way worse than NASA's making it out to be." Apparently, what happened was one of the female astronauts that they sent up there had a relationship with one other person that they sent her up there with, that they broke off either when they got there or before the flight, but obviously because they couldn't cancel it, it went ahead. And so she was stuck with this this person on the crew, and she just kept she started to sabotage certain areas of the ISS so that they would send her home, because she was like, fuck this, I don't want to be here.
Really?
And I forget the way that the toilet gets into it, but I gotta find it, because like this was an actual like investigation that someone pulled. They were tracking like all the headlines of the story as it was developing, and they're like, guys, I think there's something more going on here.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to read that story. That's interesting. It's funny to think that astronauts have the same human problems that we do here on Earth. 4chan though, that makes me a little sus. Not gonna
Oh,
lie.
no, for sure. So take it with a grain of salt. But
Yeah.
let me see if I can find it.
Oh boy.
Okay, so apparently it's
Largely
largely fabricated. Okay.
I don't know. I want to believe now.
I want to believe too because apparently, what was that last search that I had about the toilet? Yeah, they had to spend like millions of dollars developing a specific toilet just for her.
23 million.
Yeah, it was designed to be more comfortable for women.
Dang.
They spent 23 million on a toilet, and I think she broke
That's
it.
a lot of toilet.
That's a lot of toilet, man.
That is a lot of toilet.
But yeah, in the 4chan story, it was talking about how like she went out on the first spacewalk, and then she either purposefully let go of her tools or accidentally they just floated off into space.
Oh. I could totally see myself doing that on accident. Whenever I'm working with my tools, I leave stuff everywhere. It's like, where did I set that socket? And I end up doing a couple laps around the lab trying to find it. It's definitely me. Need everything tethered to me if I was in space, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find, because I don't want to make a claim just like that and just drop it.
Might have to follow up on that one. That's funny.
I mean, even if it was true, they would never come out and say that because that's
No,
like
that
so
would be
much
a
money.
big PR problem.
Yeah. No evidence. Okay. Okay. So maybe I got tagged by 4chan. Oh well.
Oh, but there is some. Read number 1 there. She was arrested.
Oh.
And an astronaut.
No, but see the story that I was reading, it was talking about like a recent launch. So maybe
Oh,
this
okay.
maybe there's like stitching of different stories to make it real.
Maybe. Or maybe it's a recurring problem and NASA's just covering it up. That's probably right.
Maybe. Who knows? But yeah, no, that's I don't know, man. Like I've had a roommate before, and he was my best friend. But spending all that time with those strangers, fuck that shit. I mean, you'd go into it with training and everything, and you'd probably spend a lot of
Yeah.
time with them before launch. But
Especially in tight quarters, like sharing crazy toilets like that. Oof. I don't know, man. That part would be rough.
and you really have to rely on those people, like with your life, like absolutely with your life. If anything goes down, like that's all you have. Nobody's coming to save you. That's it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a lot of commitment. Incredible. Yeah. Do you think that we'll ever you think that we'll be sending another ISS up soon? Because I heard that they're trying to essentially like slow down the progress of that program and eventually shut it down.
Yeah, I think right now they're planning on they're doing plans for end of life of the ISS, and they gotta find a way to break it up without crashing into a city and causing a bunch of damage. But I think their new program is they're trying to replace it with commercial space stations. So have private companies send up their own laboratories and just kind of subsidize those companies to have their own new projects instead of having an international space station. So I think that's the future of space station for NASA right now, is that Japan or China is rushing their new space station program. It is crazy. They're going so fast trying to build a really big space station. I think, what is it called?
Tiangong.
Yep, that's it. So they're really trying to hurry with that. They've got some crazy work going into it. So that's what they're working on. But as of right now, we don't have a plan publicly available to replace the space station with another international space station. I think they've already sent some capsules up for Tiangong too.
Like with people?
Yeah, it looks like they've got 3 capsules launched for that one. I don't know if they have people. Good question.
Interesting.
Yes, they do.
Ooh.
They have teams of 3 who rotate every 6 months in that space station right now. So they're just out doing their own thing. I think Japan's developing one too.
What do you think that landscape looks like when financial interests of nations get involved, like in, let's say, like mining or trying to colonize moons or other planets? I mean, with the current treaties that we have, like, is there even any declaration? And well, also at the end of the day, a treaty is not really anything. It's just a piece of paper. It could be ripped up or amended or what have you.
Yeah, one of the problems with that is how are you going to enforce those when there's people in space? It's a lot more difficult to send an army out to space to say, this is my territory. I think a lot of it's just going to be first come, first serve. Whoever gets there and lays claim to the land is going to have it. Kind of similar to the colonization of the Americas. It was just who got here and then developed it is who was in control of it, right? It's going to be something similar to that. I foresee it getting messy pretty quickly because the US is heavily invested in it and we're going to fund a lot of sending people into space, but there's also a sentiment for keeping it independent. So if the US sends all this money to send people to Mars and develop cities there, and then the Martians just decide they want to be their own country now, then how does that work? I don't know. I could see some problems developing from that, but we'll just have to wait and find out.
Yeah, like they could just mutiny against ground control and just be like, "Fuck you guys, we're doing our own thing here."
Yeah, and then what's ground control gonna do about it, right? What power do they hold over them to enforce their will?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, guys, just stand still in that exact spot for 9 months. We're sending a payload of food.
Yeah, we're gonna send some police up there to enforce our laws on you.
Okay, a little
I
bit
can
more.
see that getting messy.
Yeah, a little bit more on the sci-fi side. What do you think? What do you think weaponry in space would look like, both like in terms of like vehicles and actual like handhelds?
Yeah. So I don't see any reason why modern guns won't work in space because they have the oxidizer built into their propellant. So I think you could bring just a regular gun up there into space. The problem is the stakes are so much higher because you're throwing metal slugs around, and if you puncture things, then it's a bigger problem there than it is here. There's some cool stuff going on with like laser development right now. There's not a whole lot of public information about it, but I'm pretty certain that they've got lasers that can shoot down drones and satellites, so I'm fairly certain the US has some pretty crazy laser technology that we haven't shared with the rest of the world. But they've come to the point where they've revamped some like destroyer battleships to have laser beam modules on them instead of guns. So that's kind of interesting. New sci-fi-ish weapons development.
Interesting. I mean, look, if anyone's gonna have the best space weapons, it's gonna be the U.S. hands down.
We certainly spend enough money on it. That's for sure.
Whoa.
Yep. Blown up submarines and explosives with lasers.
That's
kind of cool, right?
That's nuts.
They don't even have to like send missiles. They just target the missiles on the plane and then just heat them up until they explode.
Yeah, for anyone just listening to this, we're just watching footage of a battleship that has essentially a laser cannon, and it's aiming at a smaller satellite ship away from it. You don't even see the laser, and it's just aiming at this ordnance that's on this dummy ship, and it immediately explodes like within seconds, which is that is deadly.
Pretty crazy stuff. Super high energy intensive though, so one of the problems with like trying to do that in space is, like it says right there, it needs 15 to 50 kilowatts to run that. That's a ton of power. I think that might be more. Does the ISS even have that much? I don't know.
I like that the guy controlling it is using like a Xbox controller.
Yeah. That's funny. So yeah, you probably potentially could power that with something like an ISS, but it takes so much power. It's not like a handheld laser cannon like you see in Halo or something like that. Not yet, anyways.
Not yet. I wasn't sure how long you wanted to record. I'm good to keep going, but I just want to let you know we're at the 3-hour mark.
Yeah, it's up to you. I'm fine. I don't have any plans, so.
Fantastic, because I love asking all these stupid little questions I have about space. Like it puts it in a real context. Okay, so on that note, in terms of weaponry, actually no, not weapon. I wanted to ask about this. Do you know you must be familiar with the concept of a Dyson sphere?
Yeah.
Okay, is that something that's just like, it's a matter of like sketching it out in AutoCAD and simulating it, or can it actually be like made? Would we need to
is
expand?
it possible? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
like
saying?
would we need to expand material science beyond the point that we have it now, so that we have all these different elements and whatnot, or like it's just not feasible with what we have now?
I mean, you definitely would want some better developments in material science for that. It's possible. It's certainly possible to do something like that. It's just such a monumental effort that we're talking on a whole different time scale when you're talking about things like Dyson spheres. Like, if all of humanity developed put all their effort towards that right now, you would have not much to show for it on the scale of like a generation or two. You probably wouldn't have much visible results from that. But on the scale of like hundreds of years or thousands of years, if we were all working towards something like that, then yes, it is potentially on our horizon in the distant future. But yeah, the concept of a Dyson sphere is kind of cool. I think we're a long, long way away from that. Like, we would have to probably colonize, it would be a more reasonable goal to colonize the entire solar system, industrialize it, terraform all of the available worlds before building something like a Dyson sphere.
Really?
Yeah. Just because of how massive something like a Dyson sphere would have to be, it would consume like all of the resources on all of Earth, all of the resources on all of Mars, and then you still would have like maybe a single ring around the sun, and you're talking about like deconstructing an entire planet to get that many resources, because that scale is just so massive.
Even if we like don't do it on the sun and we find like a smaller star, even then there's just the sheer scale of it.
Yeah. A smaller star would definitely be more reasonable, like something like a neutron star. But then you're talking about interstellar travel, which is a whole nother can of worms, because you'd have to go to that star and then carry all of the mass there, which would be another huge monumental effort. The only conceivable like long range space travel solution right now is build like a self-sufficient ISS that's just massive, and you point it in a direction and then cross your fingers that it survives the vacuum of space long enough to make it there. And then another issue you run into with that is you'd have to have enough energy on board to survive for 1,000 years to travel to another star. And how are you going to do that when you get so far away from the sun that solar power is just completely ineffective? You'd have to rely on something like nuclear power. And then I can only imagine how difficult it would be to have nuclear power functional on something like the format of a space station without the resources we have here on Earth. That's like a huge monumental task. It's certainly possible. All of those things are engineerable problems, but we're a lot of steps away from them.
I see. And in regards to interstellar travel, is because right now I would assume the main concern is, as you said, like longevity, is being able to survive the trip long enough to actually do anything with your time there.
Yeah.
But as the tech stands, like, is that really our only limit? Because right now, like in terms of our rocket development and all that, and just even let's say if we created like, I don't know, self-sustaining food growth on something like the ISS, if we were able to do that, like
Yeah.
if we solved for that, the longevity issue and the resource issue, is it something that's possible? Because what like the concern would be like, okay, well, how far do you want to travel, and will there be an Earth by the time that you get there, or like will there be civilization? Like, is that the main
Yeah.
issue as well, just because of how far you're going to be from it?
So some other issues you'll run into are you'd have to shelter against cosmic radiation, so that you would, as you exit the sun's sphere of influence and you're exposed to more of just the deep space radiation over a long period of time, over a scale of something like thousands of years of travel, I could conceive that would damage human DNA beyond the point of surviving, unless you have a way to shield against that. And then another problem you're going to run into is like, how do you get a metal to survive on the scale of thousands of years without fatiguing it to the point that it just turns into dust? Like, metal kind of has a finite life cycle, especially like aluminum. If you like stress it over and over on the scale of years and years, eventually it just fractures. So you would need some pretty crazy materials to build such a long-lasting spaceship to last that long. And then you'd also have to have some type of propulsion system to push you incredibly fast and launch you off into the distance like that. And it would take some pretty massive rockets. But all of those things are just physics problems. None of them are completely impossible. It's just, those are some pretty massive problems to work with. Like, how does the human body behave in space if you're born in space and you die in space? What does your body look like? Like, your bone structure is probably nothing compared to what it would be here on Earth. And then how do you, over 1,000 years of adapting to life in space, just land on a planet over there that's potentially habitable, and just you're not going to be able to just walk off your spaceship and live life as if it's normal, even if you have a perfect atmosphere, like a perfect Earth replica to walk onto. You'd be like a different species at that point, because you would have adapted so much to the space travel. So there's a lot of pretty massive challenges, and I think it's not impossible, but I think on a more reasonable time scale, it's more realistic to industrialize the solar system before attempting interstellar travel.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd never considered that it would just the background radiation would affect you um so strongly, because I do know like that we are, thankfully, not only with our atmosphere but just with the formation of our solar system, protected from a lot of the like really really dangerous things in outer space as we further go out. And yeah, I mean, once you're past our solar system, you're just kind of not flying blind, but you're just out there in the open, and you're hoping that for like also like the navigation system is good enough so that you don't get caught in the gravitational pull of anything that's passing by, um no matter the size. I mean, that alone too, like, because there's just like everything is out in space. Everything. There's just like shit that's just flying at like
Yeah,
speeds that we can't even fathom right now. Um, and it could just zip by at a moment's notice, and you don't like couldn't even expect it. No amount of calculating or math or anything could have prepared you for it. It's just happens.
yeah. There's a lot of variables to account for in that, and it's impossible to account for all of them. So you have to like have some form of adaptability to just be able to survive whatever new problems you encounter along the way, right? And so it would be a bit of a shot in the dark to try something like that.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things in space that scientists just don't understand yet, like dark matter and things like that. What is that? What is the definition of dark matter, and how does it behave and influence other things? There's just a lot of physics depth knowledge there that we don't have yet. One of the limits of human knowledge is that we have finite lifespans, and you can only learn so much over a certain period of time. Like, your brain's only capable of absorbing so much information.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best use cases I see for like AI in the future is, okay, now that AI has finally figured out this advanced case of physics, it's not 95 years old and gonna die tomorrow. It's 95 years old and it's gonna live for another 10,000 years. So it can continue to progress and absorb and develop information to levels that are just impossible for humans. So maybe AI will be able to solve one of those problems for us in the next set of centuries.
I mean, just if we're just spitballing here, the one of the solutions would be uploading ourselves digitally. Um, I don't know if you've heard of this show. Highly recommend for everyone to give it a watch. It's called Pantheon. It's um, it's a show that's animated in a Western style. Um, kind of slept on because on its release, like they never hyped it up, which I don't understand why. But it is an amazing show because it takes that idea of like, what does it mean to upload yourself? Um, what does that say about your humanity? What does that say about your capabilities and danger of somebody being uploaded? Um, Very well done show. It just had 2 seasons,
Interesting.
and I think I don't think they're doing another. Well, I'm not spoiling it, but I don't think there's any way for them to follow it up. But it's
Yeah,
amazing show. It's only 2 seasons, I think, like 10 episodes each. First season you can find on Netflix actually.
interesting. Yeah,
But so they posit that um, one of the ways to kind of beat immortality is, or to achieve it rather, is to upload yourself. But then because you become something else entirely. Like,
Yeah.
what does that do for the future of human civilization? But at least we get to keep thriving, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, do you remain human if you are uploaded? It's the big question for me. Are your
Yeah.
motivations the same? Do you keep your intuition? Like, how much of you can they retain in a computer program? Right now, obviously, we're a ways away from that, but it is an interesting concept to think about for sure.
And then then what happens if there's a copy of you? Does that count as a separate you? What if it's like malfunctioned in some way? Is that still part of you? And what happens when governments get involved in that business? And anyways, they just posit this whole interesting world. Um, that could be one of the ways that we go about it, or maybe not even like full upload, but just I mean, like in Interstellar, is the
Mm-hmm.
TARS robot? Is that what they're called? TARS?
Yeah.
Yeah, like something like that that has like that human feel to it, but it's still fundamentally a robot. Maybe just sending out a bunch of those things out into the ether and then seeing
Mm-hmm.
what they come up with. But even then, we're still waiting for the signal to come back to Earth, and we're not exactly working in real time.
Yeah. And then there's the people that say that AI is just the next step in the evolutionary process. Like, that is what will define consciousness in the future. They will supersede us eventually. Just another interesting take to think about.
I'm all for it, honestly. I want them to accelerate, and I want it to be out in public as much as possible. Um, at this point, like I have no scope of understanding regarding like all the dangers with it, but
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's gonna happen at some point, and I'd much rather I'd feel comfortable even with all of America's problematic history with wars and conflict and all that and bureaucracy and everything that Trump and Elon Musk and all those people have uncovered, but I feel a lot safer America being behind the wheel than I do China
Yeah. Completely concur with that statement too.
or Russia or Iran.
Yeah.
Like I'm Russian at heart, but I know how testy that relationship is with the U.S. So I want as little antagonism in that space as possible, and it's good to see that a
Agreed.
lot of AI development is happening in the U.S. now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hope that we can continue to have a competitive space in AI. I think it will be not a good thing if it becomes a monopoly. I hope that we can continue to have diverse set of perspectives developing AI and it's not just one superseding the rest. So I think all the little companies should not give up, keep trying.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of them out there, and one interesting development that's actually come about when I was speaking to Tuna, he mentioned that um, there's this argument to be made in the world of AI right now that models have kind of reached their peak in terms of how many times and how efficiently they can be trained on all these different data sets. With the O3 model that recently came out from OpenAI, that's kind of thrown it into question because, from my understanding, they added another list of parameters to the testing, and then they tested all the previous generations of OpenAI releases on it, and they found that
Mm-hmm.
O3 was remarkably better at all the other versions previously. But some people are saying like that's only because you added the parameter. There's arguments on both sides, but anyways,
Yeah.
even with that, Tuna essentially highlighted this issue that some people think there's this wall of AI development. So now there's been a shift towards developing and training AI agents because what's
Yeah.
better than a single chat GPT is 10 chat GPTs that are able to bounce off one another and uh, follow a set of instructions and all that. And that's from what he told me, he thinks that that's where it's going to be headed for the next little while.
In my opinion, I think the best application of this is starting to move these models onto hardware so they can actually physically do things. Like, not saying that programming and stuff like that isn't a physical action, because at some level it is, but I think applying this to the real world will be a good way to scale this to a more, it'll be a good incentive to advance things, right? If you can actually start profiting on these AIs physically, then we can start tackling that side of the problem and get some physical advancements from these things, which is such a huge, hard, difficult task. It's so much easier said than done. Like, it's so immensely difficult to just program a robotic arm to pick up something in one position and move it to another position. Like, that's quite a task. But if you could offload a lot of that work to AI and get more adaptability in robotics so that it can handle a wider range of tasks, then that would be a pretty impressive way to scale things, but also dangerous. So
yeah, on that note regarding the training, there was actually a recent news article that came out. I'm just trying to find it here. It was basically the company that created Pokemon Go. They have actually, what they've started to do is they've taken all the data that people have submitted from all their snapshots of the world, taking all those pictures, to create a geospatial model of the globe. And
that's pretty crazy.
And on top of that, they are now feeding it into all these different AI training models so that they can create an image of the world and allow the robot to better adapt to it in real time using all the previous scans. So all those free photos that people took over the years were put into this, huge directory that the robots are now training on, and now they're going to enable the robots to like better adapt to their environment. So you'll have like a construction bot that's able to deal with, all the mess of all the materials and everything lying around, or I don't know, just any automaton that needs to move. And that this could more plays like this, like creating a more like live streamed, essentially like geospatial understanding of the world. Like that's apparently the next key to this.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing that they're able to do that.
Yeah.
It's quite a big, difficult problem to solve, automating stuff for spatial awareness. As we see the full self-driving capabilities on Teslas, that's the problem that they're solving with their cars, basically. And then adding a whole nother layer of complexity to just, okay, now you're not on a set track like a road with all these specific rules that everybody is supposed to follow. It's just open world with way less rigid structure. I can only imagine how much more difficult it would be to account for every variable in that situation. But yeah, I really want to see some more development in robotics, and I'm pretty excited to see what Tesla pulls off with their Optimus robot. Looks like they're moving pretty quick with that. It's cool.
Well, actually, speaking of autonomous driving, have you seen this this clip recently?
I don't think so.
So this is a Waymo car, and let me just play it. Just watch.
All right. Wow.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So for those just listening, this is footage of a Waymo car that's split into two, with the top layer showing what the Waymo sees versus what we see in the bottom. And there's a lady in the scooter in the bike lane that trips over herself, almost falls into the road, and the Waymo car just perfectly executes a turn to avoid her completely.
Human reaction time could not account for that, that's for sure. That robot just saved that girl's life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
there's no way.
And they're not even using like the advanced tech that Tesla's using, because Waymo uses LiDAR for their vision, from my understanding. That's why they have that weird spinny thing on
Yeah.
top of the cars. Because apparently it's gotten so cheap that now companies like that can just have it on top of their cars, even though they're getting burned down by all these randos.
That's crazy too. What a weird duality of worlds San Francisco is, right? It's like utopian and dystopian at the same time. Like all the
Yeah.
craziest tech startups are there, and there's so much development, and also one of the worst rampant homeless problems in the entire world, right there. Third world and first world.
Yeah, I was actually just speaking to Javen yesterday, and he lives in SF.
Yeah, I heard him talk about the death zone, right?
Yeah, and I stayed in the hotel there with my family.
Yeah. He posted that map too late for you.
Yeah, no, that was nuts. It is insane how you just have the most prosperous, among the most prosperous, if not the most prosperous state in all of America, and they just have just absolute like decrepit areas that are not safe to go for the average person, and yet they make the most sophisticated AI tech. Like I could go to work at OpenAI or wherever and just be working with the next gen anything, and then I go to the grocery store to get some duct tape and it's closed behind a barrier.
It's crazy. Such a weird reflection of reality right there.
So strange.
Man, I hope they get that sorted out. I mean, they're obviously capable of it. Did you see the news story when President Xi Jinping came there from China and they cleaned up all of San Francisco to show it off for him? Like, they cleared all the homeless out of the streets. Everything looked nice. They swept all the streets. And then, like, a week later, it was back to normal. So they're physically capable of fixing the problems there. It's just a corrupt system, unfortunately, that they need to fix.
Yeah, that's actually an old Soviet tactic. They used to do that with the bums in the cities whenever the Soviets hosted an Olympics. They'd just take them, bust them out to like the middle of nowhere, and just leave them there. I don't know if that's what San Fran did. I heard mixed stories. I heard this one guy, at least this is what he was saying. He said that he worked with a lot of the homeless in the area, and he did keep in touch with some of them because they do have phones.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I couldn't get a hold of any of the guys that I usually talk to. I don't know where they went. There's no information whatsoever. Just one day they're there and then they're gone. So I have no idea what happened to those people. And you know, the funny thing is, when that story broke, as is Canadian fashion, it's a stereotype. It's an ugly stereotype of Canada, but it's true. In a lot of ways, Canadians have their noses up in the air when it comes to looking down on Americans and a lot of their predicaments that they have. And we think that, oh, because we don't have that, like we're even better. Nuh-uh, bro. We didn't do it for Xi Jinping. We cleared out the homeless here in my city when Taylor Swift was coming down, okay?
Oh no.
Yeah, dude, yes. Yes, she was coming down. And because of the amount of money she's bringing in, dude, they named a street after her temporarily. They
Really?
like, oh yeah.
Temporarily?
Well, while she was there for the 2 weeks there, but yeah, they had a motorcade specifically.
Crazy.
Yeah, specifically for her. They closed down the roads. Oh my god, it's so fucking dumb.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're no better up here, trust me.
Oh, that's crazy. Swift Street.
Yeah, they renamed it Taylor Swift Way or something.
That's crazy.
They had a whole
I've
block.
heard that since she stopped touring, or she's projected to stop touring or something, that it's actually going to have a measurable effect on the economy because of how much influx of money she provides just by doing shows in different cities. The Taylor Swift way.
Yeah, there it is. Number one, the first
That's
street.
crazy. Number one.
Yeah, no, she definitely does have a sizable market impact wherever she goes. Yeah, that was the same weekend. I had a buddy come and stay at my place, and it was also around the time of the Tyson fight. We've been like planning to watch it for a while, so I was like, oh man, this fucking weekend, the Tyson fight, Taylor Swift, everybody's just coming here. It was nuts. I remember when I went to pick him up, it was just this sea of pink and sequin dresses. I was like, oh fucking Christ.
That's crazy. Did you
Yeah.
watch the Tyson fight then?
I did, yeah, and I got together with some of my friends. It was Jesus fuck like so fucking disappointing.
Yeah.
The women's fight was more entertaining than anything.
That was actually very good. They picked some good prequel fights for that.
Mm-hmm.
But did you catch the part where he had his ass out on live TV?
Oh my god, dude, that was fucking nuts, man. That was insane.
My
And
wife was watching with me. He's like, "Love you, son." Turns around and his ass is out. We're like, "Oh."
oh, and Netflix, obviously, yeah, obviously they'd fucking.
Oh,
What's your-
that was crazy. What's your prediction? Vicious win. Love you too. They zoom out the camera.
That's so good.
Oh, classic. I felt like that was a showcase of Netflix's downslide though, because they were not very good at keeping good bandwidth up during that streaming event. It
Oh,
was
brother,
so
yeah.
patchy and low resolution the whole time.
It,
Kind of
yeah.
annoying.
No, it definitely was. I was juggling in between all these different pirated streams, and like I had like 5 different tabs open. I was just trying to keep up the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was the same thing for the Joe Rogan special, unfortunately. Which,
Oh, it was.
yeah, I find that very strange. I don't understand how like. I understand like if there's a time where your system is going to be most vulnerable, it's going to be during something like that, and I have no doubt
Yeah.
that some malicious actors were out there trying to fuck with that. But
Mhm.
even with the traffic that they handle, like you would think that in the 21st century we would be able to have good enough infrastructure where of all the
Yeah.
places in America, like they'd be able to get that right, and I don't know, they just couldn't handle it.
Guess they need to restructure their priorities a bit and focus on infrastructure. I don't know. And then I saw the decrepit old boomer that was in charge of NFL, and he's like, "We're so excited to be working with Netflix," and he was like cutting out the whole time, and his mic wasn't working. And I'm like, "This is not a good sign." It's like you're supposed to be bragging about this business venture you're doing with Netflix, and it's cutting out, and you're talking into a mic that isn't working. It's like,
That's jokes.
I could just picture the stock market shorting Netflix the entire time I was watching that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like in the streaming game there's really like only Netflix and Prime. Like everyone else just kind of gets like the scraps of what they don't get. Like
It's like turning back into conglomerations again with Disney, how they've like purchased Hulu and there's Paramount on there now. It's like everything's split apart and now it's all starting to come back together.
yeah, but I think there's still going to be plenty of room for other players to join in, especially like when we get um like text to video gen that can withstand like movie making type stuff. So like people could just open up independent studios where they just run all the compute or offload it to the cloud, but like they have their own models of their own weights and whatnot, which would be kind of tricky with copyright. But even then you could still get like an A24 type studio where it's all built off of like indie films or just very like artistically selective and curated pieces, or even just like, I don't know, a bunch of film students get together and just amass all their footage, and
Yeah.
make their own studio because of how cheap compute becomes.
Yeah, my brother, he wants to be a videographer. So he's like, he hasn't gone to film school or anything, but that's all his side projects are buying fancy cameras and trying to record videos and make movies and stuff. So I wonder if he'll be able to take advantage of these new AI technologies. I hope he can. But yeah, do you remember the writers' strike that happened? I think it was this last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the writers for TV shows just stopped going to work because they were afraid their jobs were going to get taken over by AI. And then it kind of accelerated that.
Oh yeah,
Like they were
yeah.
trying to protest it, and then the studios were like, well, now what are we going to do? I guess we need to use AI now.
Yeah, I do remember these protests, and you know, just like we were talking with the dock workers, I understand the strife of these people, and how
Yeah.
they feel to an extent. But at the end of the day, like, guys, you can really only stop the progress for so long, because the longer that the progress impedes for Hollywood or this union, or you know, whichever body is involved with that
Uh-huh.
strike, it just leaves more room for somebody else to come along and be like, well, we don't play by these rules, and we do use AI, and we're going to corner the market with media content, and or so on and so forth. It's just you slow yourself down, someone else is going to speed up. It's only natural.
Yep, I agree. It's interesting stuff.
I think it's fine. I honestly don't care if my media has like more AI in it. I mean, it's already happening. Like South Park did a whole episode on
Yeah,
ChatGPT when it came out, and they wrote the entire thing with ChatGPT.
and it was odd and not as good as a normal episode, but that was like ChatGPT 3.0. It wasn't even like 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
You imagine what it would be like with like O3 writing it? Might actually be even better. And it was still a watchable episode, like you said. Like I sat through the whole thing. It wasn't that bad. So
Yeah, yeah, and even one of the more famous examples was actually, uh, let me see this, the opening credits for uh, Secret Invasion famously used all AI gen,
hmm.
and it was among the first to do it,
Oh,
and it really comes out.
yeah, that's kind of cool.
It's not bad.
Yeah, it's kind of like obvious to me that it was AI gen, but it's not that different from like what it normally would be, right? It's kind of good.
Yeah, stylistically, it works. The show was shit.
Mhm.
I wouldn't recommend anyone watch it, but but the intro looked pretty.
Yeah, that's funny.
But yeah, I think that we're moving towards that, and I'm all for it. I think that this this hold on like copyright and infringement on ideas, it's gonna become a thing of the past at some point, and I'm all for it, man. I honestly, I've made stuff in the past before, like artistically and otherwise. Personally,
Mhm.
I don't give a shit if someone fucking came over and took it or made it something better. Like, it's another thing if someone like literally was trying to pass it off as their own, one for one,
Mhm.
and you know they're actually like lying and like ruining my reputation or something. But
Yeah, that's a different story though.
yeah, but like as training data or being able to edit certain parts with AI, like yeah, by all means, like you can torrent and pirate just about any piece of media that's out there right now. Like there's nothing different. It's just done on a different scale.
Yeah, that makes me think of like how Tesla has all their patents open sourced. So you can go look at all of their designs for everything and copy it, and they won't like pursue legal action against you or try to get royalties
I didn't know
because
that.
they understand how difficult it is to build the infrastructure to manufacture all this stuff. They're like, nobody's gonna try to copy all of our technology and make money off of it. But they're also doing it as a way to try to be progressive, I guess, and share their technology and just advance the human race because they think they've got some good stuff. It's interesting, right? The real thing, I was like, if all their patents are open source, I tried to track down how to read their patents, and it's a little convoluted, and I wasn't able to like actually get drawings and stuff like that. But the one I want to see is the patents for their Optimus robot, because I want to see how all that stuff works and what they're developing there. But I'm not sure if they've taken the time to publish all of that yet.
Let's find out. Not open source.
Yeah, so not right now. But as far as like their cars go, you can go look up their motors and stuff like that.
Let's see if we can't get AI to give us access to that.
Mm-hmm. So there's some patent work right there for solar cells.
Does it say who it's filed by? I don't see Tesla anywhere on this.
They've got names on it.
Let's see if he's ever
Yeah,
contributed.
that would be a good AI tool to make navigating all the convoluted patent files in the US.
That's a ChatGPT wrapper waiting to happen.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, so
Yep,
yeah, he
looks
has.
like he is making patents. So they've just got their individual employee names on the patents. Cool.
Trying to see if it'll
Yeah, they've
let me
got-
open up a sketch. Oh, right. It would help if I downloaded the PDF. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they really do just have it out in the open.
Yep. And that's not like a engineering level drawing where it's like these are the dimensions and this is how you put it together, but it does have all of their ideas out there, and they've stated that they're not gonna pursue trying to get royalties on any patents. So I thought that was an interesting move.
That's very cool. Of all the companies, I would expect Tesla not to be the last, but they certainly wouldn't be the first to do something like that. And that is,
They've certainly got valuable intellectual property, and they're just kind of laying it out there for people to use if they want.
that's ballsy. That takes a
Yep.
lot of balls. You got to really have like, not only like a confidence in your ability to hire all these people that you know for a fact they are the ones that are the only ones that are capable of making stuff like this,
Mhm.
but that more importantly, you have such an innate understanding of the tech itself and what it takes to develop something like that along each step of the assembly line and the what's it called, oh, I'm drawing a blank, but in any case, every single step that's involved in making of it, an understanding of the market that nobody else can do it like you can.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm in agreement with the sentiment too. It's like keeping your work kind of secretive protects yourself financially, but it's not optimal for progressing the human race, right? So it's like protecting yourself with a monopoly on your new technology, which is not really their mission for the world as far as what they've stated. They just want the human race to develop quickly, so
Yeah, you don't really come across a lot of a lot of people that run their companies on that basis, or at least say that they run their company on that basis, and then actually continue to run their
Yeah,
company
like
on that basis.
successfully run them on that basis, right?
Yeah, the only
Pretty
car
big
company
task.
in U.S. history to never go bankrupt.
Yeah, I think Ford is also one who's never gone bankrupt, but
Mm.
they're certainly the largest manufacturer of cars in the US. Like one of the biggest employers too, which
That's
a lot of
amazing.
people don't think about, but like Ford and these other supposedly US companies have outsourced a lot of manufacturing to like Mexico to take advantage of cheap labor there,
Mm-hmm.
which is not the best in my opinion.
Yeah, it's we've had some developments with EVs here in Canada. Like they recently, I mean, I don't know. I see EVs as being great for a place like the US, but here in Canada, just with the fact that we have such cold temperatures for a good chunk of the year, it it just diminishes the capabilities of EVs to such a
Yeah.
great extent that I find that it would be difficult to justify something like that, especially also with
Mm-hmm.
how um just how awful all the salt is up here that they use on the roads and how
Yeah.
it degrades the vehicles over time. Um, it's very concerning because like my government up here, like Trudeau's saying that he wants to make it so that um, all EV production, like no car power production for like 2030 or 2035 or something. They're aiming for that goal, which makes
Crazy.
like absolutely like that's some California type shit. Like for the whole
Yeah, that
nation.
really is. Have you seen Edison Motors?
No, but I will certainly pull one up.
That's my favorite Canadian EV company for sure. They're pretty cool.
I don't even know we had an EV company.
They make diesel cat engines that are just electric generators, so you can get longer range,
Hmm.
but they're fully EV. Like if you want to, you can just plug this in and never turn on the diesel engine and just run it. But when you have to like go up hills and things like that, or if you want a longer range, then you can kick on your diesel generator and it'll power the whole truck.
Why have I
So yeah,
never
they're
heard
pretty
of
awesome.
this?
And they're doing it in a way where they take these old Kenworth trucks and they just revamp them. So they're not like building a whole new frame. Well, they are building a whole new frame, but they're taking the cabs off of these old trucks and fitting them with new equipment. They're pretty cool. But they have so much torque. They're really good at like pulling huge heavy loads because those electric motors are just really good at that. And I really like diesel engines too, so I think it's cool that they've got big cat diesel engines in there. Or actually, they're fairly small. They're like small cat diesel engines powering their batteries.
Wow.
Interesting stuff, right?
No, I'm genuinely enamored by this. I don't understand why this isn't being like this is the first that I'm hearing of this from a fucking podcast and a guy that I randomly met on it. Like this should be a point of national pride for us. Are you guys serious? How is this the
The
first time I'm
government's
hearing
been
about this?
fairly unfriendly to them too. Like all these EV tax credit stuff that they're supposedly pushing for companies up in Canada, they haven't really been super helpful or friendly to Edison, at least when I was watching their YouTube videos pretty regularly a couple years ago. Hopefully that has changed and gotten better for them recently. Another thing they're doing is these pickup truck conversions. So they'll take a smaller cat engine and an old diesel truck and convert it. And I have an old 1983 GMC diesel that I think would be pretty cool to get their pickup truck kit and convert it to electric diesel. I think that would be a fun project. So
This is amazing. I'm in love with this.
yeah,
Like just the way that they look, I love it. The way that they have the cabin design, it, it looks like a fucking truck. It's perfect.
and they've got a good sense of humor about it too. named it Edison Motors because they're stealing all of Tesla's work.
Oh, they're like all the patents and whatnot, or do you mean like the original Tesla?
As in, like, how Thomas Edison stole all of Nikola Tesla's ideas.
Hmm.
He's taking the idea of electric vehicles and mapping it over to trucks. So it's
That's a
kind of
good
funny.
one. I like that.
But yeah, I think it
Wow.
would be fun to take one of my trucks and convert it to that.
And also cheaper because you're paying Canadian dollars and our money's not worth shit.
Yeah, that's
You
how that
know?
works, right?
That is no, it's true. Our dollar has never been like this weak since like I don't know the 70s or something. So
Yeah,
yeah, now's been there's never been a better time to invest in Canadian companies. Yeah.
yeah, that's funny.
Wow,
Funny
that
for
is
me as
awesome.
a non-Canadian resident. Sorry for you.
No, hey man, over here we have to laugh, otherwise we cry. So we've been
That's
laughing a whole
good.
lot. Oh wow, that is actually incredible. I need to. I just found my next topic for my my newsletter for this week because this is perfect. Look,
Yeah,
I
he's not got a huge following. He might be willing to come on here and talk to you. I don't know. That would be pretty cool though, if you could get Edison Motors on here.
500K. Okay, well they're big enough,
Yeah,
but
he's got
yeah,
a lot. Yeah.
still no, it would definitely be worth reaching out because like I all I want is for the revival of Canada and for us to move past this bureaucratic hellhole that we've placed ourselves into. Like the highest growing industry in terms of
Uh-huh.
employment in Canada has been the government. Like
Yeah.
since 2015 when Trudeau came into power, the government in terms of employment numbers has risen by like 40%, which is higher
That's
than
depressing.
it's higher than any other labor market combined. Well, not combined, but
That's crazy.
yeah. Um and that's not even getting into all the social issues and all the cultural stuff. Like that's I could fit several hours of that. But I just want to see Canada win and getting more of these companies highlighting them. Like this is amazing. This is incredible because I was
Yeah.
just shitting on EVs for it being an issue in the winter, and here's a guy that proved me wrong, working exclusively in like the
In like
I
Alberta.
yeah, like in the fucking I'm in Toronto. Our winters aren't nearly as bad as Alberta.
Yeah. He's
There,
like,
they're
let's go
anti.
to the mountains of Alberta and do EV trucks.
Yeah, it's so cold there that the antifreeze freezes.
Yep. It's crazy.
It's nuts, and that I definitely need to highlight this story. This is important. I'm genuinely surprised that I never heard it on the news, never heard it in passing. Even my friend who like his dad is he's like a major electrician
Yeah.
in where he lives, and they're both like gearheads and they love cars and all that, and they've never even heard of a company like this because 100% you would have mentioned it. So yeah,
Yeah, they're
that's
doing
that's
good stuff,
incredible.
so spread the word. They're pretty cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm gonna go fucking follow them right now. That's awesome. Yeah, incredible stuff. That's great. Hats off to them. I wish them nothing but
Yep.
the best of luck because their shit looks great. It looks like an actual truck.
Yep. They do a good job. They take pride in their work and putting out good stuff. I hope they can keep going and scale up and move out their trucks everywhere because I like this style of trucks better than the stupid van semis I see everywhere.
I just love that it's rough, it's rugged, the lines are
Mhm.
sharp, there's no curves to it. It's all just pure
Yep.
force, you know?
Like extra heavy duty too for lifting huge heavy loads. So
Oh yeah, they got rivets just for the hell of it. Like half the rivets on this
yeah,
thing shouldn't even be there. They're just slapping them on there just because they look nice.
there's flexing. Yeah.
Wow.
Some more metal we can polish up. Yeah, those snow trucks look pretty cool, right? Could you imagine those things running around everywhere? That would be awesome.
I mean, I would, but I used to live on a street in Quebec where the snow plows would like scrape the ground with all their force. So I'm just sleeping and it's like 3 a.m. and I could feel like the house vibrate. I was like, oh,
Vibrating.
Jesus, fuck, man. Yeah, it's no joke up here, man. Well, I mean, what am I saying? You're in Utah. You guys get plenty of action there.
Yeah, we do. We're pretty warm this year, though. It's like 35 today. Normally, we've got a lot more snow this time of year, but
Wow. Cool stuff, man. Yeah, no, I'm really glad that you shared that with me because I'm definitely gonna do some more looking into this. That's amazing.
yeah, for sure.
Shit, I'll buy their stock. Hell yeah. Gladly. To the moon. Yeah, that's amazing. I wish we had more of that here in Canada. It's slowly like I've seen it in the various like tech circles, not just on Twitter but also in person. There's a concerted effort, especially on the part of the Shopify CEOs.
Mm.
They're really doing a good job of advocating on behalf of businesses and trying to make it so that there's more of an emphasis on innovation and getting rid of a lot of these just senseless bottlenecks that really don't need to exist.
Hmm.
Like
I
there's just
didn't
a
even
lot
know
of
Shopify was from Canada. That's cool.
yeah, they're I think they're based out of Ottawa if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
that's what it looks like.
Uh, yeah, I guess it doesn't say here. But in any case, yeah,
All right.
it is a it is a Canadian company. But yeah, they've really been outspoken about getting more business development in Canada, which is great to see.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think I'm gonna go home now and make some dinner with my wife. So, thanks for
Yeah,
talking
no,
to me, though.
fair enough. We've been going on the fourth hour. I really appreciate you um, taking the time for all that. That was great, man. I would love to have you back on someday to talk more about your future projects and hopefully one day here that you made it to SpaceX.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
You know that would be fucking sick, man. Hey, all the best to you, man. You got a hell of a
Yep,
story.
you too.
Loved having you on, and hopefully we'll have you on sometime in the future.
For sure. Yeah, thanks. Have a good night.
You as well. Take care.